Call the meeting to order pursuant to Standing Order 1082. Committee is studying the subject matter of Bill C-63, a second act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 2017, and other measures. I would thank all the witnesses for coming today. Some have been invited by all sides of the committee. So I would hope you can hold your remarks to about 5 minutes. We've got an hour and a half and 5 panelists, so we can go a little over that. We'll start with Ms. Roussel, Canadian Nurses Association. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for the invitation to be here with you this afternoon. I'm a registered nurse representing the Canadian Nurses Association, CNA, the national professional voice representing more than 139,000 registered nurses and nurse practitioners. Across Canada, there are close to 5,000 nurse practitioners that provide care to over 3 million people in Canada. I'm pleased to be here today to speak about the specific measures related to nurse practitioners hereinafter NPs in Bill C-63, Budget Implementation Act 2007, number 2. We are pleased to be here to discuss this important bill ahead of Nurse Practitioner Week, which starts on November 12 and ends on November 18. On May 17th of this year, CNA appeared before this committee to inform members about the important role NP plays in our healthcare system. Our official testimony before the committee on Bill C-44, Budget Implementation Act number 1, noted that NPs conduct physical assessment, order and interpret tests, write admissions and discharge orders and prescribe medications. As an update, I'm pleased to say that NPs enthusiastically joined our October 24 webinar on the update regarding the Form T2201 Federal Disability Tax Credit Certificate, a new authority for NPs. NPs have certified the DTC since March 22, 2017, Budget Day, which was the day the changes took effect. The proposed amendments in Bill C-63 will provide Canada's NPs with the capacity to treat patients to the full extent of their qualifications. As this committee is aware, these qualifications include the ability to complete documentation about their patients' medical conditions. CNA has gone through the proposed amendments in Bill C-63, and we are pleased to let members of this committee know that the amendments complete the remaining clauses where NPs are needed to be added to fully modernize the legislation. As a result of these changes, NPs will be identified in the Income Tax Act and the income tax regulations as eligible to provide certification or reports related to other tax measures wherever certification or reports are currently provided by medical doctors. We are pleased to see that these changes will lead to amendments to the medical expense tax credit, the child care expense deduction, the definition of qualifying student, registered disability savings plan, and the registered pension plan regulations. We therefore encourage members of the committee to accept the proposed changes that will enhance access for patients whose primary care is delivered by an NP in both rural, remote, and urban communities across Canada. As we move forward, CNA anticipates that similar changes will be made to the Canada Pension Plan Disability Benefit. CNA has met with both ministerial and departmental officials at ESDC about changes that will authorize NPs to complete the disability-related medical reports for patients. These changes will not only enhance access to care, but will also lower healthcare costs. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage members of the committee to support the recommendations that were outlined in CNA's pre-budget submission in 2018. The recommendation outlined in our brief aim to strengthen public health education for healthcare providers, including nurses. Our key recommendations to the federal government are to invest $125 million over the next 5 years on public education in advance of the passage of Bill C-45, which will include a one-time investment of $1.5 million to increase the level of cannabis education for nurses. and also invest $45 million over the next 5 years to scale up PT acute care and community-based antimicrobial stewardship program, including a one-time investment of $1.5 million to increase AMS competence and capacity among nurses for nursing professional knowledge, education, and mobilization program. In closing, I encourage members of this committee to support Bill C-63. We are pleased that the bill builds on the important changes that were found in Bill C-44. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Josette. Ms. Hanson with Diabetes Canada, welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on Bill C-63 today. Diabetes Canada is very pleased to see Bill C-63 grant nurse practitioners the ability to certify applications for the disability tax credit. They are, for many patients, their closest and most expert healthcare providers. The matters referenced in Bill C-63 affect Canadians living with type 1 diabetes the most of those with diabetes. Type 1 is a debilitating, chronic, progressive autoimmune disorder that threatens its sufferers with death on a daily basis. Its sufferers lack the ability to produce insulin, which is essential to metabolizing carbohydrates, which in turn is essential to sustaining life. While we don't know exactly what causes it, we know there is nothing anyone can do to prevent it. Type 1 is a painful, invasive, relentless disease from which none who live with it ever get a reprieve. It puts us all at high risk of serious complications like blindness, kidney failure, amputation, and heart disease, and it shortens our lifespans by as much as 10 years. Managing type 1 diabetes has been likened in complexity to flying an airplane. A study in 2009 found that there are 600 steps required to manage it each and every day. And even if its sufferers perform each of those tasks perfectly, their blood sugar doesn't always respond in kind. The same dose of insulin for the same set of circumstances 2 different days often results in completely different responses, each of which frequently debilitate the patient. Its variability means it requires constant vigilance each and every day. Some people with diabetes don't like to refer to it as a disability, preferring to focus on achieving their dreams despite this challenging condition. That is an appropriate coping mechanism for some, but by any objective measure, it is a disability for which there is no cure. Even with our publicly funded healthcare system, living with type 1 costs its sufferers up to $15,000 per year for supplies essential to delivering insulin and monitoring blood sugar. Insulin is life-sustaining therapy. Given those costs and how imperative these drugs and supplies are for us, the DTC and RDSP offer welcome financial support and security. Although the DTC is only worth, on average, $1,500 per year, that's $1,500 a person with diabetes can use toward their medical supplies and health. And there's a strong chance that a person with type 1 will face periods of disability during their working life, and perhaps even have it cut short by the complications of the disease. So an RDSP can also provide a great deal of peace of mind for those with type 1 and their families. But recently, that peace of mind has been denied to most Canadians with type 1. Whereas a year ago, more than 80% of applicants with type 1 were being granted the DTC and RDSP, since May 2017, that number has plummeted to less than 20%. As the committee well knows, the Income Tax Act hasn't changed, nor have the eligibility criteria. What has changed is the interpretation of CRA agents. Notwithstanding the difficulty of managing type 1 diabetes and the certification of hundreds of expert doctors and nurses, since May 2017, agents within the CRA have been overruling these certifications and stating that adults independently administering insulin therapy don't spend the required 14 hours a week treating their illness, so are ineligible. This change has been made without consultation or notice. Diabetes Canada has received hundreds of complaints from people with type 1 diabetes who've recently been denied the DTC. Some were applying for the first time. Many had previously received the DTC and were reapplying. Some have been told that they'll have to close their RDSPs in consequence of no longer qualifying. Every one of them had a certification from expert doctors and nurses that they meet the eligibility criteria. Not one has been cured. That's why Diabetes Canada is urgently asking the following. Number one, that the CRA revert to its pre-May practices, accept clinicians' certifications, and grant people with type 1 diabetes access to the DTC. Two, that the CRA engage in open and transparent consultations with Diabetes Canada, JDRF, and diabetes experts to create eligibility criteria and a certification process that reflect the reality of this disease. And number three, that the government consider granting eligibility for the DTC to all Canadians living with type 1 diabetes on the basis that it is incurable and that subjective application of criteria is both unfair and unethical. That's why we respectfully request that the committee rectify inequities in the application of the Income Tax Act where it concerns the access of people with type 1 diabetes to the DTC and RDSP. Please help alleviate some of the burden these hundreds of thousands of Canadians carry. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. With Gailey Foods Cooperative Limited, Mr. Dalton. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to Bill C-63. More specifically, the provisions to amend the Income Tax Act in relation to agriculture and fisheries cooperatives. As the legislation indicates, the changes are to ensure that qualifying farmers and fishers selling to agricultural and fisheries cooperatives are eligible for the small business deduction. Briefly, Gailey Foods is the largest dairy cooperative in Ontario. We have recently expanded our membership to eligible dairy farmers within Manitoba, and we are the first North American dairy cooperative to include both licensed dairy cow and dairy goat members. At our 9 facilities across Ontario, our employees produce a wide range of dairy products, from the consumer favorite Spreadables butter to North America's first smooth cottage cheese, and more recently, Nothing But Cheese, an innovative snack product made with 100% cheese. We also recently added a cheese-making facility in Alberta to our growing business. With members on more than 1,300 dairy farms and more than 4,000 members overall, Gailey Foods is as renowned for its cooperative-inspired values as it is as a preferred supplier of award-winning dairy products and high-quality dairy components. Back in the spring, we became aware that certain changes in the 2016 federal budget would have an unintentional but significant impact on cooperative member owners. A number of cooperatives, financial and agricultural groups, and experts communicated to Finance Canada on this interpretation and the potential impact on members of cooperatives. We were pleased to receive the proposed changes that Finance Canada published in May of this year and acknowledged the efficient timeframe in which they provided clarification on the technical matter. We support the proposed changes in Bill C-63 and are satisfied that they will ensure that recently enacted amendments to the Income Tax Act do not inappropriately deny access to the small business deduction for a farmer selling farm products to an agricultural cooperative. Cooperatives play an understated but vital role in enhancing Canada's economic and social prosperity and support of our local communities. I am tremendously proud that many of the values that define cooperatives are the same ones we celebrate as Canadians. As a proudly Canadian cooperative, Gailey Foods invests in our employees and members with training and leadership opportunities. We support our local communities where our employees and members live, work, and raise their families by donating products, sponsoring local activities, and providing stable, long-term, skilled employment. I am humbled that we are able to do all these activities while growing a 100% Canadian-owned cooperative. We are empowered by our member owners who see great value in supporting an innovative, dynamic, and profitable cooperative. With that in mind, as government develops policies and programs to grow the Canadian economy, we encourage you to consider the broader spin-offs and benefits for Canadians that come from supporting Canadian cooperatives like Gailey Foods. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dalton. Turning then to Mr. Thompson, Vice President, Corporate Affairs, Molson Coors Brewing Company. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and honourable members. Thanks very much for allowing me to speak with you today about a very important aspect of Bill C-63, beer concentrate taxation. As industries grow, it's imperative that they innovate and find better ways to do business, and the beer industry is no exception. Innovation has always been core to Molson Coors, our success and our culture. From the invention of the aluminum can in 1959, right through to the introduction of the first light beers to the market. Our pioneering spirit continues to drive us forward. Our latest innovation is a new draft process that will reduce beer's impact on the environment, ease day-to-day operations for retailers, and make beer available in more places without sacrificing our valued consumers. By allowing the distribution of beer concentrate in places where the standardized keg is, Molson Coors is building on an already solid reputation of being a responsible corporate steward. This latest innovation will allow for a reduction in the overall carbon footprint of the beer industry, both on the production, storage, and consumption sides of our industry. Excuse me. Additionally, we believe that businesses will realize positive economic impacts, as well as we reduce injury reduction within their environments, than the capital expense of having a keg room, maintaining its temperature, and ensuring regular cleanings, all of which in itself can be very costly. In addition, the reduced carbon footprint of having more trucks on the road to deliver the kegs, the increase in electricity consumption, and the increase in material usage on the production side makes this innovation a cause for celebration. Molson Coors has been working with our research and development team to ensure a safe and high-quality end product, which is strictly regulated and monitored for quality in every step of our process. As such, we've created and invested a multi-million-dollar innovation hub for this industry based right here in Ontario, and we'll be looking to expand the reach of this project as soon as possible. We're in the early stages right now of testing this new system in Toronto with a limited group of customer accounts with plans to expand the pilot later this year and into 2019. We look forward to sharing more details, 2018, I just jumped right ahead to the future there. We look forward to sharing more details in the coming months as we continue to prove out this concept. I can say to the panel that early reviews of the pilot are coming back very positive from both our licensees and the consumers. We're confident that this innovation will revolutionize the industry and begin a new path in beer production and distribution. Molson Coors is very pleased with the direction the government is headed and look forward to the passing of this bill and important regulations. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm pleased to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. I was wondering if that would be better with PEI water or not on that Toronto stuff.
And cheese.
And cheese, indeed. Turning then to Startup Canada, Ms. Lennox, co-founder and chief executive officer. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the honourable members for inviting Startup Canada and Canada's entrepreneurs to the table today. Startup Canada is the national rallying brand and community and voice for Canada's 2.3 million entrepreneurs. Since launching it as a social entrepreneur myself with my co-founder in 2012, Startup Canada has grown to represent more than 200,000 entrepreneurs across Canada, across 50 grassroots startup communities that are volunteer-led, entrepreneur-run, from coast to coast to coast. We represent the diversity of Canada's entrepreneurial community. It's so cool that I'm here beside Molson Coors, a great Canadian success story that many of my members wish that they would achieve one day to be so successful. We represent women, Indigenous, mompreneurs, hackers in their basements. We represent farmers. We represent every Canadian entrepreneur. We work in the best interests of every entrepreneur to foster an inclusive economy and a growing middle class through entrepreneurship. Through digital programs and flagship events, Startup Canada is the network promoting, inspiring, connecting, and giving a voice to Canada's entrepreneurs, supporting their start, operation, and scaling their businesses to build a better Canada. Our entrepreneurs, members of the Finance Committee, are one of our most important natural resources for our economy of the future. Canada is home to 2.3 million entrepreneurs and 1.1 million small businesses that account for 78% of private sector job creation in Canada, 30% of exports, and 27% of GDP. More than 8.2 million Canadians work for small businesses in Canada. So in my comments, we really must understand that the world is competing for this natural resource. The rest of the world is vying for this talent, and they're vying for the investments and their share of international markets. What we need to do is really build a Canada for our entrepreneurs to flourish and to keep them here in Canada. We believe that being fair and being competitive are not mutually exclusive. So in the recent tax consultations with regards to changing tax for entrepreneurs, since starting Startup Canada, we haven't felt more concern from our community, and certainly every member of Parliament meeting with their small business community felt this. There's never been such an outcry as there was when we started to look at our tax system and talk about fairness and our entrepreneurs. That was an opportunity for a conversation which our entrepreneurs had with members of Parliament across the government. We need to ensure that as we're building tax policy, as we're looking at Bill C-63, in all regards, that we are not inhibiting entrepreneurial ambition in our country, and that we're looking at supporting our entrepreneurs, demonstrating that Canada is behind them. Canada is behind our farmers, our dairy farmers, our Molson Coors, our every entrepreneur. We need to recognize and acknowledge the risk that entrepreneurs take on personally, financially, professionally when they start a company. We need to increase incentives for Canadians to participate in our entrepreneurial economy as angel investors and through crowdfunding platforms and unleash entrepreneurial capital. We need to ensure that there are no unintended consequences to supporting succession of businesses across generations, or really any unintended consequences as we look to modernize and create a more fair Canada. Rather than looking to see where we can tax more, our goal ought to be to grow our entrepreneurial tax base and unleash the entrepreneurial potential of every Canadian. We have seen the difference that has taken place with entrepreneurs and government working together. Through consultations, we saw the Government of Canada begin to step back and recognize that there were unintended consequences for entrepreneurs in some of the tax reforms. And we saw a recognition of the value of entrepreneurs with the reduction of the corporate tax rate. When we work together, we can create a better Canada for entrepreneurs, and we've shown that in the last few months, and we're really excited about the possibilities for the future. So in closing, we believe that the government, as it relates to entrepreneurs, can provide the best possible environment and culture for entrepreneurship. Canada, this is our opportunity today. There are 6 things that we can do and that we ask the Finance Committee to consider as you're looking forward to building our economy. First is we need to continue to reduce red tape for every entrepreneur. There's more red tape in this binder. So we need to relentlessly reduce red tape, number 1. Number 2, we need to make it easy for entrepreneurs to understand and access government services and support. Here in this binder, once again, we're talking about changes to the labor tax code. We're talking about changes to GST and HST. We need to educate our entrepreneurs on the impact that these changes are going to have for their businesses. We need to ensure that we're making it easy for entrepreneurs to understand what's happening and to plan for the future. We also need to understand, bear with me, we also need to ensure that we have the best possible tax environment to incent entrepreneurial growth. As I mentioned, this is through unleashing innovative capital solutions to seed our economy of the future. So we need to ensure that every analysis of Bill C-63 takes into account the impact on Canada's entrepreneurs and their ability to create jobs and invest in each other. Whether it be amendments to the Income Tax Act related to legislation that closes loopholes around capital gains exemptions, or ensuring that our farmers and fishers are eligible for the small business deduction, we really need to ensure that our tax environment is conducive for entrepreneurial growth. The 4th point is that we need to continue to improve domestic and international market access and access to international capital. How will the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank help us to expand trade links with China and investment between Chinese investors and businesses and our entrepreneurs? How are we looking at this investment in regional consolidation and regional collaboration as an investment in our small businesses? How are we ensuring that qualifying farmers and fishers are eligible for the small business tax deduction in, excuse me. So, in addition to opening up new markets and capital, the last point is that we really recommend that the Government of Canada work with entrepreneur support organizations like Startup Canada and other industry partners to continue the dialogue and conversation. It's only by working together that we can identify that there are implications of many of the aspects of Bill C-63 for entrepreneurs. It's our opportunity as a nation to shine as an entrepreneurial nation. So thank you so much for the opportunity to bring entrepreneurs to the table, and we look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lennox, and thank you all for your presentations. Just on your point on the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the committee had a very extensive discussion with officials on that investment bank yesterday with a lot of good questions and I think a lot of good answers. If you were to go to yesterday's minutes, you'll learn a lot about where that investment bank is going. To start questions, then we'll go to 7-minute rounds. Mr. Sabara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, everyone. Wanted to start off with the Canadian Nurses Association. The ability for nurse practitioners to now write these certificates, if I can put it in general terms, can you outline some of the benefits for the healthcare system, and can you outline some of the benefits for patients with disability, please?
Thank you for your question.
You're welcome.
It is absolutely beneficial to both the Canadian, the patients and the healthcare systems, and also for the teams. You have significant time wasted before in finding practitioners that would complete the form, and now having more practitioners that can complete the forms make it as an accessible process for patients. And right now we know that there are over 100 forms per week that are completed by nurse practitioners already since March. So it has a fairly significant impact on access to this service for Canadians.
Okay, and this is obviously coast to coast to coast, so it benefits all Canadians.
All Canadians, yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to, well, we're talking about beer this afternoon, innovation in beer. I guess it's kind of great to learn. So will this make the keg obsolete? Will we not see that anymore?
I would say not in the near term, but it is definitely an option that could transform the industry. It will be a lot of this will pertain to adoption within our industry, and that's the longer term goal of this objective.
Okay, and if you can just kind of on a relative basis, the reduction in the carbon footprint, because you've alluded to it. So I'll just, you can tell us some more details on it, dig a little deeper on that?
Sure, absolutely. I mentioned trucks off the road, in a sense. The payload is going to be a lot lighter carrying these. They're literally like a box. So you can imagine those will be taken off the road. There's also a lot to do with the packaging. Right now, cleaning and creation of kegs in aluminum format is very costly and also uses a lot of water to create them and to clean them. This packaging is 100% recyclable and will go right back into the system. And then also too, from an electricity standpoint, the liquid will be cooled at the point of distribution. So you won't have to worry about keeping it cool in a large room. So refrigeration costs and electricity costs will be reduced as well.
Okay, and the innovation hub that Molson Coors has started in Ontario, and I go back, I covered your company on the bond desk, and I was glad when you guys put security on your C-dollar bonds. We were all very happy on that, and you changed your corporate structure. Can you fill us in how many people you expect to be working there, what the amount of the investment is?
Absolutely.
So it sounds like a great news story for Ontario.
Yep. It's a facility just right near our brewery in Toronto. It is a physical facility that we have. It currently employs the project team, which I would estimate is approximately 10 people. And that's just been a core team that's been working for the past year or so on the project. And the total investment to date is just shy of $5 million.
Thank you. And going to the Diabetes Canada, Just wanted to we've heard some numbers around in terms of, we've heard this 80% rejection rate or 70. I've heard. Do we have a source for this data?
Yeah, thank you for your question. We have multiple sources for this data. We have personally been contacted by several hundred people with diabetes complaining that they've recently been disallowed. We've also received a number of complaints from a number of diabetes clinics across the country who are saying that they're seeing multiple rejections, which has previously been not the case. We've heard from a number of social forums of people with type 1 diabetes who've been commenting on a strong pattern. And we've heard from the Association of Canadian Disability Benefit Professionals, which is an association of companies that provide assistance to people that choose to have it, applying for the DTC and the RDSP. So based on the number of people just that have contacted Diabetes Canada directly in the past couple of months, we can see that in the past 6 months, there have been 715 disallowances that I've seen copies of, and only 5 or 6 approvals, not all of which are adults. By contrast, in the same period, the previous 6 months, there were more than 1,000 approvals and only 5 or 6 disapprovals. So I don't have a complete data set. We asked the CRA for this information. I understand they don't keep records in the way that we would ideally want them in order to be able to answer the question for people with diabetes specifically. We haven't received a response to our question even in more general terms. So I don't have statistical data from the CRA, but I have many, many, many sources that are expert in this community, all of which is pointing to actually a ratio that would be far worse than 80% being rejected.
So I understand, and I on the diabetes, people living with diabetes, obviously there's a lot of it's very disruptive to one's life and the medical condition and so forth. I just really when 80% rejection rate, I would love to be able to see the hard data on that, on where that number's coming from, and not just be it a circumstantial number that's been pulled.
I share your desire, and as I said, I've ATIP'd the hard data, and once I have it, I'll be happy to share it. I think, though, that a key point is that even the CRA themselves has acknowledged in the last week that they changed the verse in the first week of May that introduced the language that an adult independently managing insulin therapy generally does not require the required 14 hours a week for that therapy unless there are complications present. And so they acknowledge that they made that change, and that change has caused a spike in the order of like hundreds, if not thousands, of additional disallowances of people who had previously been allowed and whose doctors and nurses are certifying it. So whether my 80% number is valid or not remains to be seen, but the unquestionable reality is that there has been a marked change in practice that is adversely affecting tens of thousands of Canadians, and we need it to change as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm actually.
You're over, but go ahead.
Oh no, just to move to Victoria. Thank you for coming. I met up with the START folks from York Region. If you can just talk about what's most important for the small innovators out there, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. So Startup Canada, like I said, we work with over 200,000 entrepreneurs, including in York Region, and our entrepreneurs are looking at the early stage. They're looking for access to capital, access to information. One of the biggest opportunities that the Government of Canada has is making all of the investments in innovation and infrastructure for entrepreneurs actually work for Canada. There's investments in accelerators and incubators, small business programs, IRAP, SHRED tax credits. We're supporting superclusters. How does the mainstream Canadian engage with that and the mainstream entrepreneur? So I think the biggest things that our entrepreneurs ask for is access to capital. So that's why we support them with financial literacy and fundability skills, help to connect them with financial institutions and work with the Business Development Bank of Canada. But what they really need is access to information to be able to access the support that they're looking for as quickly as they possibly can.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Mr. Polyev.
Thank you very much. My question is for Kimberly Hansen from Diabetes Canada. We'd like to begin by thanking her for her advocacy on behalf of the thousands of people who are being rejected in their application for the disability tax credit. And I'd like to read a letter from the Minister of National Revenue. I have it before me, in which she says, she's referring to the requirement of a diabetic that they need 14 hours a week of life-sustaining therapy in order to qualify for the disability tax credit. And she says, and I quote in this letter, "Adults who independently manage their insulin therapy on a regular basis are unlikely to meet the 14-hour per week requirement." Is that statement true?
It's not true. As I've said before, it's certainly not our statement that every person with type 1 diabetes needs more than 14 hours a week to manage that disease, but many, if not the majority of us do. And that's even for the activities that are presently allowed under the Income Tax Act and by the CRA guidelines. So, for example, allowed activities that type 1s must perform daily include testing blood sugar. We do that between 6 and 10 times on a normal day. That's about 5 minutes each time. We are allowed to calculate the time that it takes for us to calculate and administer doses of insulin. We take a minimum of 4 injections a day, and that would be on a good day. Often it would be more than that. And each time the calculations, the process of preparing the insulin and taking it would take a minimum of about 5 or 6 minutes. We're permitted to count the time we spend logging blood sugars, and that takes about 15 minutes a day to do well. And then we're permitted to spend to account for the time that we spend analyzing the results, because the patterns in our blood sugars and our responses to insulin tell us what our next doses ought to be. And as I mentioned during my remarks, those vary wildly day by day. So just on those very basic activities, which are by no means all that goes into managing type 1 diabetes, it's very, very easy to spend an average of 2 hours a day, 14 hours a week managing type 1.
And so there is a change at CRA in the department's perception of the amount of time it takes to treat type 1 diabetes. Is it your view that change in perception is responsible for the massive increase in rejections of diabetics applying for the disability tax credit?
That is my view, and that is consistent with what we've been told by the CRA in conversations as recent as yesterday, which is that they formed that belief, they wrote that into verse and began using that new verse in interpreting and responding to applications from people with type 1, that verse saying adults with type 1 don't take 14 hours.
Sorry to interrupt, but by verse, do you mean that's the language I just quoted from the minister's letter?
That's what I understand from the CRA. I'm trying to learn their lingo.
So CRA has taken wording that has been used in the minister's letter and used that to deny thousands of diabetics their disability tax credit.
That's correct. And so we asked them who they consulted with in order to form that opinion. And it appears they have acknowledged themselves that it was perhaps a misinterpretation of some complaints they had from some endocrinologists who were saying that they didn't feel comfortable having to attest to the fact that I spend 14 hours a week checking my blood sugar or dosing insulin, because I do a lot of that outside of a clinical setting. That's a very valid concern, and we share that concern. We don't like the criteria as they're written, but those complaints and criticisms from those endocrinologists were about the certification process, not saying that adults with type 1 don't spend 14 hours. And so even the CRA has acknowledged to us that they may have misinterpreted those complaints and formed them into a new interpretation that is resulting in a discrimination against adults with type 1.
And that discrimination was brought to light, you brought it to light about a month ago. It has been on the public record, widely reported in the media. Since that public controversy erupted roughly 4 weeks ago, has the government solved the problem?
No, they have not. Our
Okay.
conversations with them as recently as yesterday are to look at how we might set up a process to engage in a series of conversations with experts to inform them about what goes into managing type 1 and so that they can inform us about their clarification procedures and questions. I don't feel we're willing to participate in those conversations. We think educating them about the ins and outs of managing type 1 is critical to a real solution, but I don't feel optimistic based on those conversations that change is anywhere near imminent or that they have a willingness to look at changing their recent practices.
Of those rejected for the disability tax credit, of those who had doctors certify that they qualified for the credit, but then were rejected by CRA in the last year, how many in the last month have had their tax credit reinstated? Have you even one case of someone who's called you up and said, you know, since the minister learned of this problem, I've had my tax credit reinstated?
No, I have not heard of any cases of anybody being reinstated. They have frozen the applications of every person with diabetes for the disability tax credit since our meeting on October 25th, is my understanding. And so right now, none of us are getting refused or approved, but I have not heard, I literally have only been able to find, and I've searched far and wide, 5 cases of people who've been approved since May. No one's getting through that I can find.
Wow. How much time do I have?
You're pretty near there, but go ahead. You're on a line of question. We'll let you finish.
Okay. And you have, when was the first time you brought this issue, this high rejection rate, to the attention of CRA or other members of the government?
Late June, early July, we wrote some letters to both the minister's office and to the CRA and attempted to engage with them.
So it's been 4 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Just on that series of questions, have you met with senior officials at CRA or anybody from Diabetes Canada in recent weeks, or have you requested a face-to-face meeting with officials?
We have, and we did receive a face-to-face meeting with the Director General of the relevant part of the CRA on October 25th, sort of in close proximity to the initial press conference. And we've had one follow-up by telephone yesterday.
And where is that discussion going at the moment? Do you know?
As mentioned, we're currently looking at setting up a teleconference for the last week of November, whereby we will have some endocrinologists, some nurse practitioners, some general practitioners available to discuss the application process, the eligibility criteria, the clarification questions that the DTC normally asks, and attempt to engage in a process to educate the CRA employees about what goes into managing type 1. We're currently still at the stage of establishing an agenda and agreeing upon who might be party to that conversation.
Okay, thank you. That's good information. Mr. Dussault.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll excuse me, I would like to make a notice of motion, and then I'll go back to our witnesses. So the motion reads as follows. On Thursday, I would like you to set aside some time on this issue so that we don't interrupt the witnesses at that time, and that could allow us to debate it and have the opinion of my colleagues. So the motion is as follows. Given revelations in the media according to which Canadians may be involved in tax avoidance that is abusive or tax evasion, the committee invite Stephen Brafman and Leo Colbert, a former senator and responsible for the funding of the Liberal Party of Canada, to appear before the Standing Committee on Finance in order to answer questions about their assets abroad in countries considered tax havens. I'd also like to reserve most of my comments to Thursday. Today, I just want to mention the importance of this study would be to understand why these two particular people are saying they acted perfectly legally, and maybe this would shed light on how this situation could be corrected so that this immoral behavior become illegal. So that's just my introduction to the instance, and we could debate it Thursday.
Schedule it in on Thursday.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Sinon, je voudrais revenir rapidement sur...
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get back to the issue before us regarding people with type 1 diabetes in Canada. According to the minister, nothing has changed. The interpretation hasn't changed. We've heard this many times. Since this comes from someone independent or from civil society, the government might realize something's going on. There's a problem here. Because when we say it, we repeat it 100 times in the Commons or in committee, and the government does whatever it wants. And we repeat the same question. So when the CRA says that 14 hours is not being fulfilled as a condition, do you really think that the CRA has the ability and the medical knowledge to make that assessment and make that decision? Well, that's one of our major concerns, if I understood your question properly.
CRA agents are overturning the certifications of expert doctors and nurse practitioners who are attesting that in the case of their patient is requiring the 14 hours. As I mentioned at the outset of my remarks, I don't pretend to say that every single type 1 always takes 14 hours a week, but many do. And who could possibly be in a better position to comment on that than the doctor or nurse that's managing that person's care? So where those doctors and nurses are putting their licenses to practice on the line by saying, I'm saying my patient meets these criteria, I find it frankly stunning that analysts in tax centers would be feeling that they know better and overturning those attestations.
Peut-être juste le rapide commentaire aussi.
A quick comment on this issue. We also hear, and I think it's in the same letter than the one my colleague read, technology has changed. So what's your response to that? Thanks to investments by your organization into research to try to mitigate the effects on patients' daily lives, these technologies may allow people to use up less than 14 hours. So is there some way we could address that situation or that comment that the technology has changed? That's another excellent question. Thank you.
Has improved vastly in the area of management of diabetes in recent years. It's stunning for me even to think about what's happened in the last 20 years, to say nothing of what's happened since insulin was discovered in 1921 by a Canadian doctor. That technology and the improvements and advancements in it have made it very possible for people with diabetes to manage their diabetes much better than they used to. It has helped us. Studies have shown countless studies have shown that it's improved our ability to minimize the risk of complications and death. They minimize the costs to the healthcare system in terms of how much emergency healthcare people with diabetes require, etc. But there is absolutely no reason to assume that it takes less time or that it makes the management of type 1 diabetes quicker or easier. In fact, the reverse is often true. So to just expand on that slightly, whereas in my grandfather's day, he took his blood sugar by a urine strip once a day and took a fixed amount of insulin by injection a certain number of times a day, and then just basically ate the same kinds of things day after day after day, and that was how you managed it. Now a person with diabetes often has an insulin pump that needs to be primed and calibrated and programmed and responded to. They wear continuous glucose monitors that buzz them many times a day to say your blood sugar is rising or it's falling or you need to take another dose of insulin or I have low batteries or what have you. We take our blood sugar with glucometers, as I mentioned, 6 to 10 times a day. It's a much finer process for managing the disease, but it is not quicker. Quite the contrary. And in fact, the costs of the technology that help us live better and protect our health and the healthcare system, costs to the healthcare system, are more the reason why people with type 1 diabetes can ill afford to lose a $1,500 tax credit, let alone their RDSPs.
Rapidement, pour le temps qu'il me reste,
Have little time left, so quickly, regarding Molson Coors and the new technology, we're talking about new technology in healthcare, but when it comes to beer, I'm wondering, what's the current tax treatment of beer as we see it here that's concentrated? The two things we're trying to correct today. What is the current tax regime? Is it considered ordinary beer? Could you shed light on that for us?
That was one of the issues we came into this as, is it is brewed as beer. So it's brewed as beer. The water is taken out of it. So 80% of the water is taken out of it through a process after the brewery. So the excise is applied at the brewery. So the full excise is realized there. And then in transport, it does go up to a higher alcohol level. So we just didn't want it to be treated as spirits because it is still a beer concentrate. And then when it's reconstituted at the end, the excise is applied there as well at the consumer level. So it is beer throughout the whole process.
pour éviter que les droits d'assises,
So avoiding having excise tax collected on the total volume of the beer at the outset before it's processed into a concentrate.
At the brewery point. So in a sense, all excise taxes remain whole on this whole process.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Dussault. Turning to Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I want to follow up with Ms. Hanson in terms of, my questions are not around the qualifications in terms of the amount of time spent, but I want to talk about some of your numbers because I think we need to understand if the suggestion is that, we do hear that there has been no change, and so if the suggestion is that, well, all these disallowances show that there has been a change, and then the numbers you provided in your testimony, there seem to be differences. So in your opening remarks, you said that Diabetes Canada has received hundreds of people have complained of rejection. Then when you answered Mr. Cervera's questions, you said several hundreds of clients have contacted you. Then Mr. Polyev said thousands, and then you said 715 disallowances, and then you also said you received the 80% number, but you don't know if that number is correct. So which number is it? You've received 715 disallowances that Diabetes Canada has indicated. How many of those 715 had been approved previously?
So thank you for your question very much. I don't think that there are inconsistencies between those numbers. I have personally seen several hundred, 715 cases of disallowances. I, of course, know that I have by no means seen every disallowance that there's been for people with diabetes in the last 6 months. And I have statistics that are coming from groups that treat thousands of patients or that support thousands of patients in trying to access the disability tax credit. So that's where the thousands come from. Of the 715, I'm afraid I can't provide you with a breakdown of exactly what proportion previously had qualified for the disability tax credit, but based on a poll of a group online that represents 1,500 people that have been seeking the DTC and RDSP for a number of different conditions, I would say that a third to half of the people who have been disallowed in the past 6 months had previously been approved for the disability tax credit. So it's clear that it's affecting both new applicants and people who are reapplying.
Where was that online poll? Who conducted that?
It was conducted by the administrator of the Facebook group on the disability tax credit and RDSP.
Oh, okay, so it was a Facebook poll, and between a third or a half of the Facebook poll said that they'd previously received the credit and now don't.
A third to a half of the people who said that they have been disallowed since May for diabetes, a third to a half of them had previously applied.
Of 1,500 on a Facebook poll.
Not all 1,500 are people with diabetes. They're just people in this forum. So what I'm trying to say...
Okay, so a forum of 1,500 people, not all recognize, or not all have diabetes, and a third to a half, we suspect, have identified that they received it at once but now don't. So it's a third or a half of less than 1,500 on the Facebook poll.
No, I would not say that Facebook group in no way represents every person that's applied for the DTC
no,
or
I know,
RDSP.
but that's the testimony, so I'm just trying to make sure I write down the right numbers.
But by all means.
Okay.
And I just want to really be clear that I have never said that I have scientific numbers. I wish I had them. I filed an ATIP request in early August asking for these numbers, hard numbers from the CRA. I'm saying that we're seeing an alarming trend, like a massive decline in the number of people that are getting approved, so that in 6 months, based on all of the sources of data that I previously shared with you, in the past 6 months, I can point to a handful of people, like 5-ish, that got approved, and I can point to a handful in the preceding 6 months that did not. So I'm saying that the world has just upside down for people with diabetes applying for this tax credit.
Okay,
I don't know what the exact numbers are. I wish I did, but the pattern is the point.
Right, so I guess it's the testimony then, the 80% is really not something that this committee can really quantify at this time. And so I guess I'm curious, in terms of the amount, have applications for people who have never applied for the disability tax credit previously, have those applications increased? Because I also know that there has been an increase in promoters. So these are companies who target individuals who actually the previous government had introduced legislation to set a cap for how much these promoters could, like, basically they collect a part of the disability tax credit up to 35 to 40% of what that $1,500 that you spoke about. So I'm curious if the promoters have actually created an increase in applications. So how many people from last year have actually applied that have never applied before? Is it possible that the increase in rejections are that these promoters are maybe targeting people who never thought they've applied, and maybe they don't meet the qualifications? Like, I'm just trying to figure out where this change is coming from.
Thank you. It's an excellent question. And there has been, in the past 10 years, an increase in the number of promoters, companies that help people apply for the DTC on a fee-for-service basis. A few of them were charging egregious amounts, and their fees had to be capped. The majority don't charge that much. I would liken their services to that of an H&R Block. I file my own taxes, but other people choose to pay for that service to be performed, and I think that that's a free market right, so I'm not so concerned personally with what they charge. They did cause an increase in the number of people aware of the program and applying for the program, and that is certainly the cause of the increase in numbers of applicants. However, I want to be very, very, very clear in saying two things. First of all, the CRA has maintained to us consistently throughout our dialogue that they want more Canadians who are eligible for the DTC to be accessing it. And so I don't understand why there would be a problem with promoters helping Canadians who are eligible to know about the program, to work with their legitimate, licensed medical professionals to be certified for it and to apply for it. So that's thing one. Thing two is, I have been very, very careful to confirm that the pattern that we were seeing was the same for the general population who were applying on their own behalf as it is for the population who were applying for the DTC with the support of promoters. And I can confirm for you, absolutely unequivocally it is. In fact, if anything, people who are applying on their own are getting more disallowed than those applying through promoters.
Thank you.
I guess though until we question, because you're over, but I've let everyone go.
I guess until we have the numbers, though, we'll have to wait and see. I guess my last question is to the Canadian Nurses Association. I know you touched on it in your testimony, but in terms of the ability for rural communities to use nurse practitioners, Can you maybe identify, because I'm kind of out of time, but can you maybe identify the rural component and why this matters so much in relation to access to doctors to fill out these forms?
Of course. We have over 600 First Nations communities that are mainly staffed by nurses and nurse practitioners, so this will meet the needs of rural communities. And of course, we have been working closely with the Nurse Practitioner Association of Canada, and they have rural nurses as members and have been promoting this as an issue. And
thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Mr. Kamish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Madam Hanson, we're going to continue on the disability tax credit. You have said, 5-minute rounds, you have said that you're doing an access to information request to get the information on how many people are being refused, how many people have applied, how many. So the Canada Revenue Agency has this information?
They have a part of this information. So the way that I understand they gather information on the rates of approvals, applications, and approvals and denials is by category of application. And so the members of this committee will know better than I that there are a number of categories under which you can apply for the disability tax credit, one of which is life-sustaining therapy, and that's the one that's most pertinent.
So the government could just release what information they do have instead of making you do an access to information request.
And we had asked them directly before we submitted the ATIP.
And what did they say?
They said that they couldn't provide us with it.
And what was the reason?
Because they didn't track information by diagnosis. They only tracked by category of application. And I said, okay, fine, give me the numbers for everybody that applied under life-sustaining therapy, and we'll just see if there's a pattern in that, understanding that people with other conditions also apply under there. And I still haven't received that information. I applied for that ATIP request in August.
2 years ago, there was a promise made that the Liberal government would proactively inform people of what benefits they were entitled to. Now they've obviously broken that promise, and I've heard that now the previous line of question was like they're attacking people who facilitate others, people who may not understand the tax code, and I'm looking at a 300-plus budget document here, who may not understand the tax code well enough to do their taxes themselves. So, do you think that's right?
I really don't. I think, frankly, that the concerns that have been expressed about promoters are a red herring. I think that it is fully reasonable to expect that some people would find the process opaque. I'm spending half of my time now trying to understand just one tiny portion of the application process for a DTC, and it's pretty tough. So I think that blaming this on the promoters is a red herring for the real issue, in my opinion, and I think that it is at odds with the statements, as you point out, that we want more Canadians to be able to access this program.
So I have here an email from a tax specialist, lives in my riding, helps people apply for disability tax credits. It's a service that they provide. I've been told that the refund timelines have also been extended over time. They went from 2 weeks where you could get your refund, and now they're being quoted by the CRA 25 weeks. Is that the same experience that you're hearing from people who communicate with you?
Often even worse. Whereas it used to be 3 or 4 weeks, now it's over 40 weeks. Most people are being quoted for a response to their application. So much so that I'm aware of one promoter that used to, last year, employ 30 people providing support for Canadians accessing this program under multiple illnesses, but they are actually shuttering their business because they can't have a business that's dependent on approval times and review times that have lengthened so much, particularly when that's 40 weeks just to get the first set of questions sent to your doctor, and then you go back into the queue and wait again. So it's clear that the CRA is overwhelmed with the workflow, and that's the reason why I'm supportive of the idea of more nurses being hired to help with that. I think, though, that that only helps in this particular problem, and this problem is quite unique. I can't say that strongly enough. I work on a group that provides support to people applying for the DTC and tries to ensure fairness under multiple different conditions, and nobody's being targeted the way that people with diabetes are. So if those nurses don't also get a deep education in what it takes to manage type 1, then they're not going to help.
Short. So in this same email, and I've been talking to Steve back and forth for quite a while now, specifically on this, he says there's two issues. The one is the initial application for the DTC, hearing back from the CRA, and the second part is actual receiving the refund. So in the small amount of cases that he says are being still approved for people, and these are repeat people who've received them year after year after year, he's saying now they're quoting them 25 weeks just to get the refund the CRA has already approved them to. Basically 25 weeks of withholding amount of cash, tax-free loan to the government that the person is eligible for. Is that the same thing that you're hearing from your members? Are they making a distinction between the two? And are the timelines lengthening both on the application front, which you said yes, but then also on the refund component of the DTC?
I've heard a lot more about the lengthening of the time that's being taken to review the applications. I have also heard complaints that the refunds are taking much longer.
Okay.
Thank you all. Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Chair, and Mr. Chair, as a new member to this committee, it's getting a little confusing. Diabetes Canada is here on behalf of the Conservatives who've asked them to come as a witness, and now they're kind of scolding us for asking questions. And it's not clear what the submission Diabetes Canada has made. And I'm hearing they also represent the disability promoters. That's something new. I didn't know they did that. And I don't know if we have that in Northwest Territories. I represent Northwest Territories. The issue of diabetes is very widespread amongst Aboriginal people. My mother was diabetic. Almost everybody in my family is diabetic. I'm not there yet, but with the pattern that has established itself, I'm sure at some point that is going to be something that is going to challenge me. I'm also stuck for questions for everybody else because most of the presenters don't have a presence in Northwest Territories. The Canadian Nurse Association has really done a lot of good work in my riding, and I'm very happy for some of the efforts that you put in to try to get nurse practitioners in the north, and they've done so much good in that area because I think I'm the only MP that lives in a small Aboriginal community, and I never in my life have seen a doctor twice in a row. Every doctor flies in and leaves. We have a very tight schedule. They come in once every 2 weeks or sometimes once a month. So nurse practitioners are doing a lot of good. But the issue of disability promoters are all issues that are very concerning. And so I want to ask the Nurse Association if they think that our government should form an advisory committee to work on this whole issue, to make sure it's clear, to get to the root of some of the discussion that's happening. It's not something that I take lightly, and I think we need to do more work in that area. Could you maybe tell us what your opinion is on it?
Of course, thank you for the question. We believe in discussions and dialogue is a good way to really hear everyone's point of view, and we trust that the committee will have the right discussions and the right decision on this issue. And we are hearing similarly that there are discussions currently happening at the CRA on this issue, and nurses are invited at the table, and we are pleased to be at the table to provide expertise and to support in any way this issue. As you know, nurse practitioners are new in this part of their practice to certified, and we're learning. We're providing a lot of education and are creating fact tools to enable an easier understanding of this new process.
And further to that, in your presentation, you talked about scaling up. Scaling up, I'm assuming, is with the nurse practitioners. Could you maybe explain a little more on what you meant when you made that comment?
Well, it's important to scale up any legislative barriers that would enable the further ability of nurse practitioners to fully practice to their full potential. So scaling up any changes that we have done. That's perhaps what I was referring to in my testimonial. And what we're seeing right now with the changes, it's very positive, and it's positive to Canadians, and will have a great impact on Canadians having access to those tax credits and not being delayed with processes and having them at a timely manner.
In the north, there's not a lot of nurse practitioners. In the area that I live in the tribe that I belong to, we have 10 communities, and most of the time we have one nurse practitioner. If the person doesn't get burnt out and decide to leave, and that happens a lot. So the position is vacant about 30–40% of the time. Is there a way that we could look at other people could take on some of the responsibilities for making prescriptions and some of the duties that the nurse practitioner has? So, you know, they do good work, but there's not enough to go around. Is there a way we can either get other people to fill in some of the responsibilities, or do you have any suggestions on how we could increase the number of nurse practitioners in the north?
Very good question. There has been multiple initiatives to try to grow their own nurse practitioners in their own communities, and some models are successful in attracting and gaining those resources that are really precious to communities, and sometimes it's educational preparation of the current nurses that are practicing in those communities, but certainly having education available to Aboriginal community members and having access to that education, to resources so that you can grow your own within your community and retain them has been successful in small communities in Canada. But it is a challenge, and I agree with you. Having, again, a dialogue and learning from each other, you can learn and develop some resources and keep them in your communities.
End it there, Michael. Mr. Albus, 5 minutes if you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for your testimony here today on C-63. I would like, though, to pursue the topic du jour today on the disability tax credit. Ms. Hanson, thank you for your advocacy, not just at this table, but ongoing commitment, making sure people get the help and resources that they need. I would just like to ask a little bit about the disability tax credit. Obviously, the average type 1 diabetic that gets on average, I believe it's around $1,500 is what it means to them. Now, there is a bigger cost that I don't think that we've discussed here today. In order for people to be able to qualify for a registered disability savings plan, you must first be eligible for the DTC. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, and you're right in saying that it's a larger issue and really a huge source of worry for the people that we represent. As the committee well knows, in order to be eligible to have an RDSP, a person must first qualify for the DTC. Once you form an RDSP, you can make contributions to that fund, and then you can attract grants and bonds from the federal government that help the individual that's suffering from a disability or their family provide financial stability for their future against the risk that they will experience periods of inability to work. So the way that the grants and the bonds work, they relate to a contribution made by the individual, but they are multiples of it. RDSPs were only introduced in 2008, and so nobody has yet been able to vest them. You can't contribute after you're 50, and you can't cash them out before you're 65, so no one's been able to vest any of their RDSPs yet. However, notwithstanding the fact that they were only introduced in 2008, I know a number of my counterparts, people approximately my age, working folks with type 1 diabetes, who have $50,000 in their RDSPs that they're counting on for their retirement and that they are at risk of losing because they've now been disqualified.
So if, let's say someone is disqualified and they had around $50,000 in their RDSP, how much of that would be government grants over the years, do you think? As
far as I understand it, the multiplier effect is about 3 or 4 times. So of the $45,000, $50,000 that somebody has in an RDSP, they would lose, I think, 40 of it. Maybe my math is wrong, but a lot of it, the majority of it, because the government, as I understand it, when they lose their eligibility to the DTC, the government withdraws all of the grants and bonds that they had previously contributed, and the individual is only allowed to retain the portion that they contributed personally.
And so since there is no appeals process for this, once you're denied, then it triggers this other ineligibility, is there not?
When you're denied, you also get notified that you'll have to close your RDSP. You then have 1 year that you can get a doctor or a nurse practitioner to fill out a form that says, I'm pretty sure this person can be re-eligible within a year. Please hold. And they'll hold for 1 year, and then after that, if you haven't become re-eligible, then it's gone. So we're in a really tight window for some folks who got notified 6 months ago that they are no longer eligible.
So with that then, where does that windfall, the grant monies go? Does it go back to the government?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So and that could be quite a lot of money. How much money do you think that there is right now? Do you have any estimates? I know I've seen one that said around $100 million is in there. And of course, in 2018 would be the earliest that anyone could start to withdraw because there's a 10-year waiting period. Is that correct?
That's correct. We don't have numbers on this, of course, but there are 250,000 Canadians that live with type 1 diabetes. At least 100,000 of them at least must be eligible for the DTC. If even just 5-10% of them had RDSPs, it would be like $150 million that we're talking about.
So people aren't going to get the help that they need right now, and worse than that, the people that have been setting aside for the monies which they were eligible for will see those monies that were set aside by previous years that they were approved will just go back to government.
That's correct.
And these, have you asked the CRA for any transparency or any accounting of these numbers? How much they stand to receive back?
I have not. The RDSP is administered by ESDC, so we're stuck in a little bit of a procedural loop there, but that is my next line of inquiry. I think I'm going to have to engage in a different channel on that.
Just both there. We're going to run out of time. Mr. Fergus, last questioner.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Madame Lennox, j'aurais dû poser des questions concernant Startup Canada.
Madame Lennox, I'd like to ask some questions about Startup Canada. I'm very much in favor of it. We've heard about it at previous meetings, and I'm very certainly happy with what has been done by the BDC for providing capital, startup capital. Mr. Thompson as well. Certainly, I'm very happy that consultations have been going well and that your industry is certainly finding some balance in terms of the beer industry. And Mr. Dauphin, thank you very much for your evidence. Madame Roussel and Madame Hansen, it is possible that I may have other questions, though, for you. So let me get right into it.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and also thank you for the good work that Diabetes Canada does in helping out. It's certainly a real scourge of a disease. It's affected my family, and it's one that I'm very sensitive to, as are millions of Canadians. I'm just trying to, just because of some of the questions and answers, I'm just trying to get my head around this, and perhaps you can help me out. Has the law changed in terms of has the law changed? I guess that's a short question.
Thank you for your question, sir. And if I may, just very quickly before I answer that question, I'd just like to thank you for your introductory remarks, and I'd like to briefly respond to a comment Mr. McLeod made in his question. Mr. McLeod, I'm so sorry that your mom had diabetes. It's, as you say, it's a scourge. And I just want to emphasize to the committee that I don't consider this a partisan issue. I'm thankful to the Conservative Party for the support that they've given us in getting this issue out in the open. I consider this a procedural issue, an issue within the CRA And Diabetes Canada is working very closely with the government on the healthy eating strategy. We're very supportive of a number of initiatives, so I really don't want to position this as a partisan issue. With respect to your question, no, there has been no change with respect to the Income Tax Act that pertains to how the DTC is made available to people with diabetes. As you well know, it's not in Bill C-63, and that's where it would be.
Right. Good. I just want to make sure about that, being a new member to this file, and thank you very much for your comments, and I'd like to echo that as well. This is not by no means a partisan issue at all, considering especially how, like I said, it's a scourge for many Canadians, and all that we can do to be supportive would be, I know, would be appreciative. Have the regulations then changed in terms of this measure for? Sorry, go ahead. I just know from your body language you're about to respond right away. Go ahead.
Apologies, sorry.
No,
they have not. I mean, other than the changes to the folio with respect to the nurse practitioners being now eligible to certify, which we're very thankful for and supportive of, there have been no changes that I'm aware of to the regulations.
And actually, that was sort of one of the things I was going to ask Madame Roussel, but I know that I have limited time. So I'm just going to ask Ms. Hanson, and I'm glad that nurse practitioners are now involved in the process, and that will be very helpful, I think, to helping people getting these applying. Then have the applications changed as well, or the applications the same that they've had?
The form, the T2201, which is the form that people have to fill out to apply, is, I understand, is constantly being tweaked to make it clearer, make it easier to fill out. So yes, that's changed. And the questions that are asked in the clarification letters have changed.
Right.
The language that's been put in the disallowance letters has changed.
So that's what I picked up from your testimony in terms of some of the questions that were asked. It's really, it's the letter that follows. It's a clarification letter that has changed. If we were to try to get to a solution on this, would you be in favor of the clarification letter rather than using the new language that seems to have caused some consternation, to use language, the old language that refers to the legislation, the existing legislation? Would that be the right thing?
That's our request as an immediate and at least interim solution. If the CRA would just revert to its April practices and interpretations of the current guidelines and apply them the same way they were in April, most of this problem would be resolved.
So if that clarification letter used the same language that they had back in April, that would, as far as you're concerned, that would be a real big improvement.
That would be a major help. There were still some challenges, some inconsistencies, some inequities, but we would be so much down the road. I would be extremely happy if that solution were implemented.
That's going to end it.
One last,
okay,
very brief. Since you were so kind, you were very kind with everybody else.
I was, and we're kind to you. You're over. Go ahead. One final question.
I'll try to make this a good one. Just explain this to me. I understand that really what goes into the calculation are really two elements, right? It's measuring the blood glucose levels as well as administering insulin. Those are really the two activities that go into the determination. Is that correct?
Yes, along with logging
logging that information. But otherwise, the two main activities plus the logging of that information, and that would go into the determination of the 14 hours.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. And as sometimes happens at this committee, one issue kind of dominates, so my apologies to the other witnesses that didn't get any questions, but I do want to comment on the CRA issue. There's no question we're hearing on the CRA side that there's been no change. Even when we're on the road with committee, we're hearing on the community side and those affected that there is a change, and there seems to be an open space in between. So I'm going to give notice right now to officials. We got a problem with data. We are meeting the minister on November 23rd and officials. I'm stating right now as chair, I expect the chief commissioner, as CRA, to be here. I expect the chief commissioner to bring with him the data as best they can that will show what the what the applications are and what the exceptions and rejections are as compared to back 2 or 3 years. And I also would expect from the Chief Commissioner the time frames on applications and turnarounds on those applications over the past 5-year period on disability tax credit as it relates to diabetes. That way we can be dealing with some facts. So with that, we'll suspend to the next panel. For the record, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, committee will study the subject matter of Bill C-63, a second act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22, 2017, and other measures. Panel 2, welcome. Thank you for coming. And we will start with, as individuals, Ms. Cooper and Mr. Robinson. Go ahead. The floor is yours. They're separate? Okay, we'll start with you, Ms. Cooper.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Cooper, and I'm a lawyer with the law firm of Drake Aptowitzer LLP. My clients are almost exclusively charities and not-for-profits. I also teach tax law and the law of charities and not-for-profits at the University of Ottawa. I chair my local hospital board, and I'm past chair of an organization called the Canadian Land Trust Alliance. And I expect that it's in respect of that latter role that I was invited to speak. The Canadian Land Trust Alliance is an organization that represents land trusts across Canada. And the particular measure in Bill C-63 of concern to them would be the changes related to the Ecological Gifts Program. I was given the understanding that's what you wanted to hear from me about. Land trusts are non-profit charitable organizations whose main objectives include the long-term protection and management of ecologically sensitive lands. Sometimes they own those lands outright. They acquire them through donation, purchase. Sometimes they enter into something called a perpetual conservation agreement, sometimes an easement, covenant, or in Quebec they're called servitudes, real or personal servitudes. And the general objective is to preserve or restore the ecological features of the land. We've got about 200 individual members and donors, 200,000 individual members and donors, 20,000 volunteers. Collectively, they've protected over 7 million acres. So that's 7 million acres of privately protected land. And this protection contributes to our network of diverse natural landscapes, and they play a really important role in delivering on the government's species at risk, biodiversity, and climate change goals. So one of the reminders I like to provide folks is that when we're dealing with the Ecological Gifts program, you're dealing with an incentive in the Income Tax Act that relates, in fact, more to environmental policy than necessarily philanthropic objectives, right? It's a measure that's designed to serve both needs, not just, to support philanthropic giving. Most land trusts are eligible recipients under Environment and Climate Change Canada's Ecological Gifts program, and there's a whole series of amendments in C-63 related to that program. To the end of October 2016, there were 1,260 ecological gifts made, valued at over $807 million. So it's a tiny program with an environmental focus, but the dollar values tend to be fairly large because they relate to fairly significant pieces of land. Most of these ecological gifts contain areas designated as being of national or provincial significance, and many are home to Canada's species at risks. To participate in the EcoGifts program, donors have to have the ecological value of the land certified in advance, and then also the monetary value of the land certified in advance. So normally these transactions don't close until the government or an independent panel has in fact certified that this is land that's important to protect and that there is no further disagreement with respect to the valuation. In addition, for land trusts to participate in the program, the land trusts have to adhere and implement Canadian Land Trust standards and practices, and these practices promote integrity, perpetual sustainability, fiscal diligence, and good governance. You know, there's an adherence to these standards and practices because generally land trusts recognize that actions of an individual land trust reflect upon the trust community at large. As I said, C63 imposes or proposes a number of measures in order to better protect these gifts of ecologically sensitive land. I actually have no specific comments. I was invited to speak and I believe take your questions about these provisions given my expertise in the area, and I'm more than thankful and welcome that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Karen. And turning to Mr. Robinson as an individual.
My name is Michael Robinson. I'm just an old lawyer, but I did have a letter to the editor printed that said that I was a former board member of Transparency International Canada, which is an organization you may have heard of and know, which is an anti-corruption organization. And I suspect that I was therefore invited to speak on the inclusion in Bill C-63 of measures to allow Canada to become a member of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And there are implications for corruption prevention that would arise in that context. So I think that's why I'm here. First, one should understand the great power and influence of the world's major international development banks, or IDBs. The sixth one is this new, since early 2015, commenced in business 2016, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Infrastructure projects in the developing and lesser developed world are and will continue to be created significantly through public-private partnerships, or P3s, involving the private sector bidding for the financing for these projects to these banks. The banks are absolutely critical to anybody getting a contract for a piece of infrastructure because they are the touchstone of respectability and financial credibility for the project when there's a private sector involved. The original 5 international development banks have the skills and finances to advise upon and become significant financiers, even equity investors, as many of them are, in these projects in those countries. Now one should be aware that the construction industry which performs these projects is one of the most corrupt industry groups in the world. And I don't think there's anything to debate about that. We've all seen what happened in the province of Quebec when the construction industry was investigated. The World Bank is clearly the leader in development of corruption controls and sanctions on the corrupt, when so found by the bank, respecting infrastructure and other projects which it finances or in which it invests. The World Bank embarked on its corruption prevention and sanctions regime development in the early 1990s under the direction of then-President Wolfensohn. They've done a terrific job. In April 2010, the other 4 established international development banks entered into an agreement for mutual enforcement of debarment decisions with the World Bank Group. So the leader of the anti-corruption motion, which really was only effective 1990s forward, encouraged the other 4 banks to join. They are the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the Inter-American Development Bank Group. This is a very potent agreement in controlling international corruption because all 5 banks mutually debar the corrupt participant from participating in any other financings, any other projects in which any of the banks are a financier. On March 7th of this year, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank issued a statement in which it recited its progress in creating comprehensive corruption controls and sanctions. It noted that it had, quote, voluntarily and unilaterally, end quote, adopted the list of sanctioned entities and individuals under the aforementioned agreement made by the Big Five, the one that I mentioned, the so-called AMEDD. Too many acronyms here, I'm afraid. This was a welcome development. I'm skipping so I leave more time for questions. Based on the fact that the World Bank's regime represents the gold standard for corruption controls and sanctions, and the fact that it has a wealth of experience in developing that regime, I recommend that Canada should condition its membership in the AIIB on the AIIB going the next step and becoming a member of this Corruption and Debarment Recognition Agreement, the AMEDD. It's encouraging to notice that the AIIB stated in its March 7th, 2017 public statement that it is actively engaging with these banks in an effort to join them as a signatory to the AMEDD. Once they become a full signatory, they would be a full formal participant in the efforts of what would then be the Big Six international development banks to fight together the scourge of corruption. That's my recommendation. I'm not criticizing the new bank at all. I think we must be aware that it is dominated in terms of its share ownership and location in China and the power to elect its board of directors by China. And China is not exactly at the top of the list of the Transparency International maintains for lack of corruption. However, we're progressing. They are progressing as they stated in March of this year. And that's why I'm making the recommendation that I make. Now, as an addendum, for any of the committee members who might be concerned about risks that Canada is taking on of investing significant sums in the shares of AIIB, as well as it's creating its own infrastructure bank, it's worth noting that the AIIB stated that it had received in July of this year the highest rating from Standard & Poor's global rating agency, namely AAA A-1+, with outlook stable. Also, the World Banking regulator in Basel has given a zero risk to the securities of the AIIB for purpose of investment in securities by regulated financial institutions like banks. And that's my comment. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. I might, if you care to look, we spent probably an hour and 20 minutes yesterday on the Asian Infrastructure Bank with, I think, a very good exchange of information and questions. So if you want to refer to yesterday's minutes when they're out, I think there was a lot of information provided there. I don't know on the AMEDD, or I can't think of it off the top of my head. Then turning to Amalgamated Dairies Limited, Mr. Bradley, President. Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today to the Standing Committee on Finance. I'm here today representing Amalgamated Dairies, ADL, which is a dairy cooperative located on Prince Edward Island. Currently, we have 165 farmer owners and employ over 300 islanders. ADL was established in 1953 and has grown and expanded to now have 100% of the PI dairy farmers as owners. We are recognized nationally as a leader in cheese processing. We export our product across all of Canada and to other international markets. The dairy industry is very important to the local economy, accounting for over $100 million of farm gate cash receipts and over 3,000 total industry jobs, generating a payroll value in excess of $100 million. Our cooperative is a source of great pride for our members, who are highly engaged and rely on their united voice to promote the dairy farmer and the dairy processor voice. My remarks today will be focused on Budget Bill C-63, subsection 125(7) amendment that ensures that rules preventing the multiplication of the small business deduction does not inappropriately deny access to small business deductions for Canadian-controlled private corporations owned by farmers or fishers selling farming products or fishing catches to an agricultural or fisheries cooperative. I will admit that as a dairy cooperative, the original budget bill was a major concern for our industry. As a dairy cooperative that relies on farmer owners to supply 100% of our milk, we heard it loud and clear from our farmers that the proposed changes to the tax system would be detrimental to their operations and future. Cooperatives are very important economic drivers, particularly on Prince Edward Island. At ADL, our annual sales of over $200 million is an important foundational piece of our province's great tradition of food production. Dairy farming is an important part of the fabric of our rural communities and a critical part of their continued viability. The original budget bill changes would have had a significant negative impact on family-owned farms, rural businesses, and cooperatives throughout the country. Access to the small business deduction, which was threatened by the proposed budget provision, provides a significant tax incentive to incorporated farm and fishing business enterprises. Many farmers have incorporated their operations to take advantage of the reduced level of corporate income tax. In PEI, the difference in the combined federal-provincial tax rate is 15%, compared to 31% for income deemed ineligible for the small business deduction. Many farm operations today involve multiple farm families, and many farm operations and rural businesses provide goods and services to corporations they or family members have an interest in, such as agricultural cooperatives. I would like to commend the Government of Canada for listening to our lobby efforts and introducing an amendment to ensure that qualifying farmers and fishers selling to agricultural and fishing cooperatives are eligible for the small business deduction in respect of income from those sales. Cooperatives have a long history of providing a model of fairness and success. They have proven very successful in the dairy industry by providing farmers the opportunity to be directly involved in the decision-making process and governance of an important part of their industry. At ADL, it is very clear from our Board of Directors that they want to remain a strong and vibrant independent cooperative. They are eager to continue to make investments both in their farm and at the dairy processing facility to grow their communities and the economy. In a global marketplace with frequent turbulence, cooperatives provide an important vehicle for this investment and a method to ensure a fair return for producers with direct input to governance. Lastly, a comment about future policy changes or initiatives. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite the Government of Canada to work with our industry and other cooperatives to determine ways to work together on policies and programs that will see cooperatives grow and expand. The decisions that are made all across government have an impact on our industry and on our future. A commitment to collaboration, consultation and discussion would ensure that policies and programs benefit cooperatives and do not inadvertently cause harm. I'd like to thank the Finance Committee once again for the invitation to speak here today in this important budget bill amendment, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jim. And that I believe I've seen somewhere in a tweet today where you just won an award for cheese at the Royal Winter Fair. I know members will be asking for a sample, but you probably don't have any in your back pocket.
They took it off me at security.
Okay, thank you. Canadian Geothermal Energy Association, Ms. Thompson, President.
Thank you, and I know that you can't see these slides. As an introvert, the slides are more for me to know that you're probably looking at the slides and not at me. So if you'll just humor me, I'll turn them in your direction and you can glance over.
Have the slides, Alison,
okay,
so you're
fantastic.
Okay.
Then it's all for my privilege and for the other witnesses. Bonsoir, and thank you very much for having us. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Iroquois First Nations, and I equally bring you greetings from Kitsillas First Nation, who will be mentioned later in this presentation as they are developing a geothermal project. We represent CanGEA, the Canadian Geothermal Energy Association. I'm the chair of the association. I'm also a member of CanGEA, and I work with two companies who are also mentioned later in the presentation. Cutting right to the chase, on slide number 2, Bill C-63 and geothermal energy. Thank you to this committee. Because of this committee in the March budget, geothermal heat is now considered an eligible renewable energy. Up until March 22nd, what we had was geothermal electricity was renewable, but geothermal heat was not. And this kind of inequity in how geothermal was treated was really holding the industry back. And so we want to reach out to you personally this evening and say thank you that we are now eligible for the Canadian Renewable and Conservation Expenses as well as Accelerated Capital Cost Adjustment. Acceleration. What this looks like, on the next slide are 5 members. I want to bring everyone's attention that because of your work that you did as a committee and because of the budget that was tabled, we now have 5 heat and power projects going forward. And the ones I'm highlighting tonight are from Western Canada, starting with Borealis Geopower out of Valemont. They're making a power and a heat project. Then we have the Kitsillas First Nation leading a project out of Terrace, BC, and that's also for heat and for power. And Deep out of Saskatchewan is also a heat and power. So up until March, these companies would be unavailable or ineligible to claim the heat parts. What Bill C-63 would also unlock is in the bottom we have 2 Alberta companies who are also developing heat-only projects. And again, up until recently, they wouldn't have been considered renewable. All these companies are using clean tech, but they're also using technology transfer from the oil and gas industry and also repurposing talent from the oil and gas industry. What's further interesting to note is that in Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Quebec, projects are also progressing, and I hope that the next time I have an appearance and an opportunity, I can report on those areas as well. Especially to note is that Nunavut right now is running an RFP for a feasibility study to use heat in the Nunavut territory, and that RFP closes on November 15th, and so they have been absolutely inspired that the geothermal heat can now be classified as renewable and hopefully used abundantly in that territory to decrease our fossil fuel reliance. I could stop the presentation here, but since I have 5 minutes, I'd like to go on. I want to bring to your attention that there are further improvements that our industry requires, and I'm hoping that the committee is able to make these amendments as well. Most notably, other renewable energies currently achieve both test turbine status and transmission expenses. So there's parity that is not yet being achieved by geothermal. And when people say, why isn't the industry progressing? People start to make up reasons why, but they're really economic, and it's because that other industries are provided with incentives or eligible for programs that geothermal is not. I wanted to bring a consequence, a real-life example of at home. I'm now on the slide talking about geothermal test turbines. The wind industry has been granted test turbine status for up to 20% of their projects. And here we have a project in Valemount, BC, that's going to be a demonstration, not just demonstrating and testing a reservoir, but also demonstrating the capabilities of the geothermal industry. This small project, again, just as a test facility, is looking to employ 50 to 80 jobs. This sounds incredible. A few slides later, I talk about it's not incredible. If you look at countries like Iceland, New Zealand, and the USA, they routinely achieve huge employment numbers based on deploying geothermal heat along with power. The Iceland example I bring for you this evening, from a mere 175 megawatts, they're able to employ 60 people at a power plant, but an additional 840 people using heat. This is all off of 2 power plants that are kind of commingled and have the heat part. And so when I say back to Sustainaville, that Sustainaville is pitching to get to test turbine status so that it too can have a test facility and demonstrate geothermal power and heat, but as well create 50 to 80 jobs. We're not making that up. I'll end with talking about another item that we do not get. So wind, solar, even tidal and hydro, they all get transmission expenses. And here we have an example where our industry too would like to have transmission expenses. Here's an example, again, real world example from Valemount, where British Columbia Power BC Hydro is serving the town. It's a 300-kilometer line, transmission line. It unfortunately stops short of the village, and there's a new load developing. It's an ecotourism resort. Because BC Hydro cannot serve the ecotourism resort, the province has approved a 7-megawatt diesel power plant to be installed. So here we are in the era of a pan-Canadian framework for clean growth and climate change. We're trying to shut down diesel and fuel switch away from fossil fuels, and here's an example of a brand new diesel power plant that could go into operation. What's standing between that, spewing out up to 50,000 tons of CO2 a year, or about 1.5 megatons over 30 years, is a 26-kilometer transmission line. If I was tidal, wind or solar or hydro, geothermal wouldn't have to ask for this amendment. I just want to close off by saying in the United States, they're targeting an additional 30,000 megawatts of build. They currently have about 3,500 megawatts online and 1,200 megawatts in development. 1,200 megawatts, just to frame that, is about $4.5 billion worth of GDP contribution. We could have this too. We have the technology and the talent. We just don't have parity with the other energies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Thompson, turning to the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, Mr. Cross. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is a Chinese-founded alternative to the U.S.-led World Bank. It's far from clear why Canada wants to help pivot the world economy away from the U.S. to China. Nor is it clear there is a shortage of capital in Asia that Canada needs to help finance, especially at a time when plans are being made for a new infrastructure bank to help make up for our own infrastructure deficit. While Asia's infrastructure needs are massive, so is their available pool of capital as reflected in its large trade surpluses. Many Southeast Asian nations have savings and investments rates of over 30 or even 40% of GDP. Their priority should be finding a mechanism ensuring that capital is deployed where it is needed the most. It is well known that it is not the amount of investment that drives long-term growth, but the efficiency of investment. Many Asian countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Taiwan had high rates of investment leading up to the Asian crisis of 1997, but these investments, often state-directed as part of their industrial policy, did not pay off. Canada's enthusiasm to have a place at the table when the AIIB chooses investment bodes ill that investment will be driven by market considerations alone. Canada and other late joiners to the AIIB appear motivated to get a share of the contracts for infrastructure work in the region. This suggests a certain cronyism is anticipated in the process of awarding contracts, with local citizens in Asia ultimately paying more for investments they may not value highly. Why Asia's emphasis on infrastructure? While good infrastructure is certainly necessary for sustained growth, maintaining growth beyond the early developmental phase requires an ability to move into consumer products with the flexibility and ability to adapt to rapidly changing consumer tastes. Japan and South Korea have auto and electronic companies that have demonstrated that capacity. China and other Southeast Asian countries have not. It is not clear more investment in infrastructure helps make that leap. Canada's contribution to the AIIB also appears premised on the idea that China inevitably will be one of the world's dominant economic powers. This is far from a sure thing. Before the global financial crisis of 2008, its rapid growth was built on exports. However, since 2009, it has relied more on domestic demand for growth, much of it fueled by debt. This is not a sustainable foundation for growth. In The Rise and Fall of Nations, Morgan Stanley's chief global strategist, Ruchir Sharma, observed that nations posting increases of over 50 percentage points in their debt-to-GDP ratio inevitably experience a prolonged period of slow growth, if not financial crisis. China's debt-to-GDP ratio has almost doubled from 150% in 2007 to 282%. Canada has nearly kept pace with an increase from 250 to 350%. He predicts China faces poor growth prospects over the coming years as a result of its recent debt binge as well as steep population decline. Projecting that China will sustain rapid economic growth seems to echo claims by experts in the 1970s that the Soviet Union would surpass the United States, then in the 1980s that Japan was poised to become the world's dominant superpower, and then finally forecast in the 1990s that the European Union would dominate. All these predictions were wrong. There are other reasons to be wary of increasing our reliance on China as the emerging power in Asia. Its policies are often the exact opposite of what economists usually advocate for economic growth. Rather than encouraging liberty and a free flow of thought with innovation protected by property rights, China controls its own internet and social media, steals intellectual property, initiates cyber attacks on nations and companies around the world, makes unsupported territorial claims in the South China Sea, engages in human rights violations, has rampant corruption, and increasingly pursues a cult of personality instead of fostering democracy. Even more than infrastructure or investment, growth in emerging market economies beyond the middle income range requires good institutions, something China sorely lacks. It is not clear the AIIB will help or retard the development of good institutions. It briefly became fashionable among the Davos elite to speak of the new Beijing Consensus on State-Directed Economic Growth as the successor to the IMF's so-called Washington Consensus. Belief in the Beijing Consensus peaked in 2014, just when the AIIB was being launched in Beijing as well. Confidence in the Beijing Consensus was soon undercut by the sharp drop in growth in emerging market economies in 2015 when slumping commodity prices and a strong US dollar revealed that this model of growth was ultimately just another illusion underpinned by debt, the most precarious source of growth. Even the Chinese seem to be losing faith, judging by the increasing amount of capital local investors are moving out of China, 1.7 trillion in 2015 and 16, leading China to impose capital controls this year. Such capital flight by local investors also preceded the Asian financial crisis in 1997. The steady outflow of capital from China, including an unknown amount into Canada's housing market, reflects that China's own leaders are skeptical about the sustainability of economic growth and political stability. It is worth recalling that the breakthrough for growth in many emerging markets in recent decades was not remotely the result of investments made over time by multilateral institutions such as the World Bank. It reflected countries adopting capitalism, tentatively at first in China around 1978, then in Eastern Europe after 1989, and then increasingly around the world as nations realized it was institutions and not government-directed investments that fueled economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cross, and we will turn to questions. First round will be 7 minutes. Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the presenters here today. Thank you for coming out to share your information with us. I'm very excited to hear from the Geothermal Energy Association. I'm from the Northwest Territories, very big riding, a lot of issues with generating power and heat, very costly place to operate. And over the period of my life, I've seen a lot of initiatives come forward. I was involved in a lot of projects. We looked at biomass, and we're still working on biomass. But in the far north, the further north you go, the smaller the tree is to the point where there's no trees. And even in the southern part of the territories, it takes probably 4 trees to make up what is a normal tree in the southern part of Canada. We looked at wind turbines And every project that we've tried had issues because the turbines are expensive, the technology is expensive, and if you're way up in a remote community and it breaks down, it takes about a year to get a part or 6 months to get a part shipped up from another country, and it'll take another 6 months to a year to get somebody to come up that's willing to come up and fix it. So it's very, very expensive to look at wind. We are trying some projects around the community of Nuvik this coming summer, and I hope they work well. But we got problems with freezing rain and ice and those things. And solar has huge potential in the summer. We got 24-hour sunlight, but we don't have that from October to February, so it doesn't work at all. You know, we're looking at hydro. Hydro is very costly. Geothermal for us is a solution, but geothermal hasn't been able to move forward. We've tried several projects and it didn't work. We just couldn't get it right. We didn't have the expertise. We didn't have all the ingredients, but we know the ground is suitable. We have everything else, but I wasn't aware that there is projects being looked at in the far north. Especially in Nunavut. I never expected to hear that. And as we move forward, I think this is going to be an area that is going to get a lot of interest. So could you just tell me a couple of things? First of all, you talked about a number of different companies. And I know there's a lot of, and the reason I want to ask this is because there's a lot of interest from Indigenous corporations, Indigenous people on renewable energy. And there is a huge need for us to convert in the north, and our government has committed to doing that. Can you tell me, first of all, if there's any involvement with some of the initiatives that you're looking at for Indigenous people to play a role?
Sure, absolutely. Let's start right in your territory. Northwest Territories, the hamlet of Fort Liard. The National Energy Board has already granted a geothermal permit to one of Kangia member companies, again, one of the ones that I work with, and it was a 51% Ache Dene Co., which is the local First Nation, and then the Kangia member company Borealis Geopower, and they were able to do a front-end engineering study with the support of Enercan, and the project did not go forward, and this was several years ago, and at the time the Northwest Territories Power Corp. Could not come to a power purchase agreement with the Ache Dene Co. and Borealis Geopower. Now, since that time, the government, both federally and territorially, has changed. There's also a new initiative that Enercan is supporting, which is the remote communities trying to get them off of diesel. And so that particular project has reapplied, and we hope that it goes forward. The discovery well was actually drilled by Chevron decades ago. And the funny thing about Chevron, an oil company, they're actually the largest geothermal company in the world is Chevron. It's not even a renewable company, it's an oil company, because of course they know how to drill really well. So here you have an example of Chevron drilled the well, they left the area in the country, and other companies are coming in after them using their discovery wells and would like to take it forward. Kitsillas Geothermal Inc. is a First Nation-led project, so Kitsillas First Nation out of Terrace, BC. They own 51% of the Terrace project and looking to move that forward under a First Nation banner and to show what local employment means a great deal and the skills training opportunities. The Nunavut feasibility study, I'd like to applaud both Killick Energy Corp., which is the Crown Corporation, for both power and heat. So most utilities are just power, but in their situation it's power and heat. Their CEO, Bruno, is very visionary about that this works. This works in 25 other countries for power and over 80 countries for heat. So why not in Nunavut? Why not in Northwest Territories? Why not in Yukon and the rest of Canada? And they have an Inuit minimum concentration that needs to go towards the feasibility study. So many of our members are now expanding our network and working with the Inuit and with the Nunavut people to help them fulfill their energy dream of energy sovereignty and security and do it in a renewable way.
Can you tell me, of all the different alternate energy, alternate heat practices out there, why geothermal would be better? Is there one or two reasons or a number of reasons that geothermal would work better than everybody else, and anything else that people have out there?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say two reasons. So I think one is the 2-for-1. You may have heard that geothermal is costly, and for example, an average international statistic to take with you is $5 million per megawatt installed. That's about double what it costs for wind and double what it costs for natural gas. Now, of course, we get that with having no emissions, and we get that with basically 100% online factor versus wind perhaps being at 25 or 33%. So on the levelized cost, even though our installed cost is higher, you actually get more electricity out of that power plant. But here's where it gets better, is that from that power plant, you also get heat. Heat is I don't want to call it waste, because it's obviously a very valuable product, but that paradigm shift of people thinking that geothermal is expensive, they're not considering that you're going to be selling two different things. And in some cases, BC and Alberta being prime examples, there's already a carbon tariff or a carbon tax, and obviously coming federally by 2022. So now you're selling three things: carbon credits, heat, and power, all renewable, for that same capital build. So there's your number one thing. But second, you cannot talk about this industry without thinking about the jobs. There's 1.7 jobs per megawatt. We are the highest job creator of all energies. And so the first thing people say to me, oh, your op cost must be huge if you have so many jobs. But these aren't jobs that are just associated with the operating costs. These are induced jobs that are created because people are using the heat. So that Icelandic example, 175 megawatts of power employs 60 people at the power plants, but it employs 840 people in the geothermal industrial park or the geopark. That tiny half a megawatt, a 500 kilowatt demonstration project, Sustainaville, that's looking for test turbine treatment, that's aimed at creating 50 to 80 jobs. These are clean tech jobs and using clean technology.
Okay, we'll have to end that there. Thank you for the discussion. Mr. Poilievre.
My question is for former Statistics Canada Chief Economist Philip Cross. Mr. Cross, you made reference to the trendy thinkers at Davos and their admiration for the so-called Beijing Consensus, which is really a state-controlled corporatism, and it exists in the form of government subsidies for favored companies and industries, regulatory protections to keep challengers out and incumbents on top, tariffs and trade restrictions to ban competition, and a myriad of other government interventions that increasingly favor the world's wealthiest and most well-connected. Do you see this as a troubling phenomenon in modern economics? And if so, what are some of the other examples of it to which you would point our attention?
Certainly, let me go back to the Washington Consensus, which preceded the Beijing Consensus. The Washington Consensus ultimately didn't work because it basically said if developed countries adopt macroeconomic stability, low inflation, low government deficits, and so on, that growth would then take care of itself. The Beijing Consensus similarly is focused on what the state does. There's a long list of interventions that she gave, but both of them actually had the same problem. They focus on what the government does instead of what the government doesn't, which to a considerable extent could be described as simply getting out of the way of market forces. Neither the Washington or Beijing Consensus has its primary emphasis on what is it that firms need to innovate and grow.
And what do you think about the approach of these? We have now this Asian Infrastructure Bank. We've already seen the Canadian domestic infrastructure bank legislated into existence. It will presumably begin operations shortly. What do you think of these mechanisms that take risk off of the shoulders of investors for big mega projects and put it onto the shoulders of taxpayers, in effect separating the natural marriage of risk and reward in the construction of major high-risk projects?
It seems to be an increasing trend in our society. I don't want to scoop. I'm writing a paper with a co-author, and I don't want to scoop my co-author, but We're doing a study of pension plans in Canada, and particularly how the public sector pension plans, not the ones just for the civil service, but I'm also thinking of Ontario teachers and those type of public sector pension plans, increasingly are taking high-risk investments. They can afford to do so because the rate of return is guaranteed by the taxpayer. The taxpayer accepts the risk. The members get the reward. It's a classic case of moral hazard. You separate the risk from rewards, and you're going to end up with some very poor and frankly, occasionally dangerous decision-making. So it's a trend that regrettably seems to be growing in our society.
Do you think that this approach of using government money to guarantee high risk adjusted rates of return to investors may have also as a ramification that investors can get lazy? They can invest in things that would not otherwise produce that superior rate of return, or that have all of the risk taken off of them by taxpayers, instead of investing in innovation. I think just very quickly to the example of Israel, when it stopped running massive deficits about 20 years ago, bondholders could no longer just lend to the government to get a rate of return. They actually had to invest in innovation, and now that's why we call Israel the startup nation, because all of this money rushed into high tech and created Israel as the startup nation. So do you think that this government intervention is actually directing investment away from innovation and towards otherwise unmeritorious investments?
I don't know if I'd focus on innovation per se. I mean, sometimes I think, I look at go back to the example of our public sector pension plans. They used to be constrained to buying only provincial government bonds. In a way, I think that might have been better than what we have today, which is them running all around the world, making investments in infrastructure and real estate and in investments that we have no idea how they're going to turn out over 30, 40 years. They're putting taxpayers and potentially the members at risk, and I'm not sure they're evaluating that risk. So sometimes, you can go too far in taking risk. I suppose ideally I don't want people investing in just government bonds, but I don't want them running around the world investing in whatever crazy idea they can think of, knowing that if the investment doesn't pan out, the taxpayer's on the hook and the managers will just dance away with their bonuses.
1 minute. Mr. Robinson, you said that the Asian Infrastructure Bank had received some sort of a rating. Was it from Moody's? Standard & Poor's. And what exactly was the rating in regards to?
Their securities, what they would issue.
To the private sector?
To anybody.
And the securities, are they on a project-by-project basis?
No. They tend to raise money broadly and then apply the funds to both loans to and investments in particular projects. And those projects tend to be 3P, and I must disagree with Mr. Cross when he says that the governments are taking all the risks. The private sector is taking the risks in a properly designed 3P that the International Investment Bank sponsor. And the best example of that is the International Finance Corp, which is the World Bank's twin that deals only with the private sector, and they make sure that the private sector is running significant risks and takes the main burden of the risk. It's the whole point of not just handing money out at the World Bank level to governments to do with what they sometimes do very badly.
Right,
and we'll have to leave it there, Pierre. Mr. Dussault.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, too, to our witnesses with us today. I want to ask a question about the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which is representing some $605 $500 million of Canadian taxpayers' money in C63. This is a level of risk. Mr. Robinson and Mr. Cross, I wonder what the effect of this Munjay will be on the world development budgets. Will it be in the same envelope where investments have been made in the past, or will this have a different type of consequence?
Well, according to the charter of the AIIB, which is in fact articles of agreement, they don't use a formal charter. But anyway, that's a digression. The investments will be made with the focus on Asia. The board of directors includes 12 members from Asia and only 3 from the rest of the investing group. The one thing you have to bear in mind, I think, is that Canada's investment is going to be as a minority shareholder in terms of the investments by all of the now over 60 countries who've joined with China to form the AIIB. The control and governance provisions in the Articles of Agreement are Byzantine, but when you examine them, it's pretty clear that the dominant shareholder is going to be China, which is why I had my concern about making sure that the bank had proper controls on corruption when it's starting out with not only Canada's $500 million, but the other $100 billion that is its basic capital.
Mr. Cross, sur là-dessus, peut-être juste
Mr. Cross, about that, the fact that it was the envelope of international development that would be used, so it's the Minister of International Development that is really funding this new AIIB. Do you have comments about this?
I just go back to the comment that Mr. Robinson made that, you know, if this was, it makes it sound as if this is just operating like a normal bank, like a private bank. And if money was just going through and risk was just being passed on, I'd raise the question, why do we need the AIIB? I mean, there's government investment, there's government involvement along the way for a reason.
Pas sûr que c'est peut-être bien compris, mais
we understood well.
J'aimerais.
I'd also like to discuss the answer we got yesterday. During the technical briefing, we were told that this was going to improve Canada's image in the Asia-Pacific region. On your side, do you think this $500 million investment will really improve Canada's image in the Asia-Pacific region? Will it really give Canadians opportunities? Because that's the arguments we heard yesterday, that $500 million would benefit Canada in some way in the final analysis. So is investing $500 million there really what's going to help Canadians and improve Canada's image?
Believe, I mean, you know, are people in Asia even aware that Canada is making this token contribution? It seems to be more, you know, I noted that the United Kingdom and Germany and some of the other nations that joined later seem to be doing so more because they want to be involved in the allocation of contracts than in getting good public relations.
Peut-être Mr. Robinson, vous semblez peut-être avoir un commentaire.
I would happily agree with that. And as a practitioner, not an economist, I'm a bit cynical. But if you looked at it from the perspective of all of these minority shareholders jumping in, 60 of them who are not going to have any power unless they vote en bloc against the dominant shareholder, China. The main reason why they're doing it is that the nationals of the minority shareholders are terrified that if they if the country isn't in, they're not going to get an opportunity to win bids to do those projects. I'm thinking of engineers, construction companies. I'm thinking of the ACONs, like international construction companies, who've just been bought by a Chinese supposedly private entity that's actually a state-controlled entity. SNC-Lavalin, the world-class engineering firm that's run into its own problems with corruption. But those are the reasons, I think. There were negative inducements that if you weren't in, your nationals weren't going to get the business.
Thought to the end of that is, even if we do get some very small public relations benefit in Asia, I would then question, is it worth the cost to the U.S.? I mean, the U.S., particularly the Obama administration, lobbied hard for the other G20, for none of the other G20 countries to join this bank. By doing so, we antagonize our biggest trading partner and closest ally. Is that worth whatever small benefits we're going to get in Asia?
If you got a supplementary, go ahead, Pierre.
Non, c'était juste pour commenter que c'est...
No, I just wanted to comment that sometimes it might be more effective to spend $500 million in a different way in Canada's economy.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, puis merci à tous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you, gentlemen, ladies. I'd like to put my questions to Ms. Cooper and others, but my comments will be limited to the Asian Infrastructure Bank.
To see your book being co-authored with Mr. Robinson. It would be a fascinating editorial process to watch. Mr. Robinson, given your experience on, I think you've made it quite clear that there's just more to Canada's participation than being than just being occupying a 1% share of the AIIB. Can you just talk a little bit further about some of the benefits that can accrue to not only Canada, the government of Canada is participating, but also to the entire Canadian economic ecosystem as a whole?
I don't see many.
Okay.
I have to say that, reiterate that the interest of the minority shareholders, I think, was to protect their nationals from the theory, which may not be a valid theory at all, that preference would be given to the nationals who are bidding for these contracts, assuming they are going to continue to be P3s, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. Excuse me. So the private sector will be involved. That was the main driver. I don't see any wonderful return to a development bank's minority shareholders. And I could be sympathetic to the argument that the $500 million should have gone into the Canadian Infrastructure Bank to encourage more private participation in that and build more infrastructure in Canada. But I'm no economist, I'm just a lawyer.
Yesterday's testimony, we heard from officials from the Department of Finance indicating that the investment wasn't going to be at $500 million, that it was actually, I think currently we're in for a share at $150 million, and that would increase to a maximum of around $346 million. So I just want to make sure we're talking, for the record, just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. For the large number of minority shareholders, or not dominant shareholders like China, which holds 30% of the bank's share capital, really. Voting power.
Right.
What's in their interest then?
Well, I have a hard time seeing it unless it's just to be part of the big six of the world's international development financing institutions. We are certainly a major member and contributor to the World Bank. We're part of the Inter-American Development Bank and the other four. It tends to be an obligation that countries are supposed to assume to buttress their general approach to international development, to participate in the international development banks. And I can see that I'm not sure that's going to get the citizens out giving us cheers in the main squares of Asian countries. But it does show that we're meeting our assumed obligations and so-called punching above our weight by being in with the rest of the world. And it virtually is the rest of the world. It's 60, and apparently there are 22 applicants waiting in the wings to join to become minority shareholders.
Mr. Cross, what would be your sense as to the theoretical interests of minority shareholders participating in this development bank?
Sorry, could you repeat the first part of that?
I'm sorry, what do you believe are, it's a similar question, Mr. Robinson, what do you believe are the interests of minority shareholders to be part of this bank?
I think I used the word cronyism, perhaps a stronger word than Mr. Robinson likes to use, but he's a lawyer, so he's probably more careful with his language than I am. I think just making sure that they have a seat at the table when the contracts for infrastructure projects are allocated. No, not at all. That could very well be in Canada's interest. I think I made the point that the people at risk here are the people in Asia who ultimately will be paying for these projects and supposedly will be the beneficiaries. I was listening to the testimony yesterday, and I remember the chair of the committee saying, isn't the point of all this the local citizens in Asia? If that's the case, then I think they're at risk. But if the case is to enrich businesses in Canada, yeah, this could make every amount of sense. But just don't call yourself a development bank then.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. So Mr. Cross,
5-minute rounds.
Thank you. So I take it you agree, you do agree with Mr. Robinson that really the only, or would seem perhaps the only argument that really for this, and that this may not be limited to Canada, that participation in this bank is simply to participate in the cronyism that's anticipated in the awarding of contracts.
There may be, as I say, there may be public relations concerns as well. I think they're very small. Maybe we want to antagonize the U.S. administration more than it is.
Okay.
Who knows what the goals are?
So, thank you. It'd been my intention to make sure we had established where you felt on that, but you got to that on Mr. Fergus's comments, I think, too. But if I may turn to Mr. Robinson, so you said in your opening remarks that membership in this development bank, self-described development bank, should be conditional upon its adoption of. You had a very specific set of governance practices.
Yes, it's the particular agreement that was signed by the existing 5 international development banks to respect the corruption control regimes that each of them has. And the way those corruption control regimes work is if participants in a particular project are found by the particular bank, not by some court, to have been, quote, corrupt, accepting bribes is the classic one, or asking for bribes, that if you look at the demand side, then the participant will be forbidden from being involved in any project in which any one of those banks thereafter should provide financing or an equity investment. And that's really powerful. That's closing the wagons around the settlers.
And thus far, there is no indication that the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank will adopt those guidelines.
No, in fact, they've made significant progress in that regard, as evidenced by their public statement. Now, I haven't had a chance to go behind the public statement and find out exactly what's been going on, but I'm going to take it at face value, that they've already voluntarily adopted the sanctions list, and we're talking over hundreds of sanctioned companies that have been first sanctioned usually by the World Bank and now by the other 4 banks as well. They've adopted that list, and they say they are in negotiations with those 5. Let's face it, the World Bank's leading it, to join and sign that agreement. And I'm saying, wonderful, let's see them put their money where their mouth is and sign it up. If they sign up to that agreement, the mutual debarment agreement, then you've got the other 5 major development banks saying, you are on board with us, and we accept the fact that you're committed to no corruption existing at your bank and debarring anybody who is corrupt. I think it's nice that they voluntarily took the list on, but I'd like to see them go the next step. And I think Canada could very easily say, we'll sign the agreement once you guys get admitted to the AMEDD, the Mutual Debarment Agreement.
So as a minority shareholder, something would seem less than a 1% shareholder based on the initial investment that Canada's to make.
Yeah,
the likelihood of Canada.
The numbers are all over the map on that. I'd never heard the 500 million until today. I'd heard in the realm of 230 million. But
well, we seem to confuse and interchange American and Canadian dollars sometimes in the conversations around this. But even if we say 1%, what does a 1% shareholder? They're going to be able to compel the adoption of the anti-corruption, and I presume that as a 1% shareholder, what would the likelihood of a Canadian holding one of those 3 non-Asian directorships on the bank?
Slim to nil, in answer to your last question. And once you get, let's say it's 63 and the 22 others are accepted, you're well over 80. Those minority shareholders really have to vote en bloc, and they have to get together. That's why we at Transparency International were recommending that TI, the major organization, there are 100 chapters. TI Canada is just
only there just to champion their national.
They're on the corruption agenda there. That they should encourage all the minority shareholders to put the pressure on China to sign up.
Okay, turning to Mr. Sabero, but just to clarify in the numbers, and this is going from memory, but the officials yesterday stated 346 million would be Canadian. Would be the maximum that we would be going to in terms of our investment in that, I believe.
Yeah, just in page 240, it says the Minister of Finance may make payments out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund to the bank in respect to Canada's initial subscription shares in the aggregate amount not more than $375 million US.
Okay, 375 US from the officials. Mr. Sabero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to wait for the AIB stuff till later on if I have time. I would like to speak with Mr. Bradley from the Amalgamated Dairies Limited. Mr. Bradley, if you can provide some color to a non-rural MP on the health of our dairy industry in Canada and how the changes that are in the BIA, or the non-changes I would call them, are going to allow the dairy industry to continue to flourish with regards to, especially with regards to any sort of cooperatives that exist, please.
Thank you. The dairy industry in Canada right now is quite strong and quite vibrant. Certainly the strength and the vibrancy of the industry is buttressed or supported by the diversity across both the production and the processing chain in the country. We have a great mix in the industry of cooperative-based farms and processors, as well as some that are privately owned. And in our particular case of cooperatives, the money that our members are prepared to invest in the continued health of the industry is quite important to help us deal with the challenges that any future trade programs or trade agreements may bring to the industry.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Over to Ms. Thompson on the Canadian Geothermal Energy Association. The measure that we introduced that's introduced in the BIA here on Bill C-63, would you characterize it as a game changer for the industry?
I would. It really came into being that geothermal heat was renewable. It's always been renewable. It just was never codified into law as being renewable. So now that we accept that it is, what's been holding back projects is that particular designation which gave access to the CRC and the ACCA. However, I just want to underscore that further. We need, it's not game changing yet because it's not complete.
Okay, and just because I know you use the acronym, you're referencing the accelerated capital cost depreciation.
Yes, ACCA.
Okay, just to put that on the record.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I'd love to shout from the rooftops and the rafters it's game changing, but we want parity, and we believe that the other renewables have sprinted ahead of us, and we're constantly called into question about what's wrong with geothermal. And what's wrong with geothermal is not the resource, not the technology, not the talent. We don't have access to the same types of mechanisms that the other renewables or oil and gas and mining, for example, have.
And I think when you mean access is access to capital.
Access to capital through being eligible for CRC for test turbines and transmission expenses.
Okay. Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing further development in that sector. Mr. Robinson, what was the rating that S&P provided the AIB, please? Do you have that handy? Or?
Yeah, I do. It is. I just covered it up with something else. AAA/A-1+.
Yes, that's so. As a former person that worked in the bond rating industry for 5 years and then covered it from the sell side bond desk at a major bank, that's actually the highest rating that any sort of entity, and that would be what would be called a sovereign entity almost, entity would be able to achieve. So it's great to see that the AIB, and it's great to see that there's a oversubscription, as we would call it, of entities wanting to apply to the AIB, which is great. And it's great to see that Canada is at the doorstep there and a great participant. Now, if I understand your angle, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand your angle is to ensure that the appropriate measures are taken to prevent corruption from taking place within the AIB. Because the World Bank functions, and there's some great things that the World Bank has done, maybe some stories that are not great, but is that along the tangent in terms of your comments?
Exactly, and we're very encouraged that what was announced in March of this year, that they seem to be going in that direction. When they were started in January of 2015 by the signing of the original agreement, it wasn't clear. There's nothing in the agreement at all about prevention of corruption, and there's nothing in the voting powers or anything like that. So some of us have been a bit concerned that they should catch up. And in partial answer to one of your colleagues' earlier questions, some of us have felt that the World Bank and the Japanese didn't want to join, and the U.S. didn't want to join, is because the World Bank and others were a little concerned that the level of corruption control wouldn't be there. I don't know whether that's the case, and the World Bank is in a difficult spot because being dominated by the U.S., as one sees, they'd be seen as a competitor.
Just thank you to comments, and excuse me for not getting to everyone on the panel this afternoon.
Mr. Albus and Ms. O'Connell will split the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go to Mr. Bradley. Mr. Bradley, in your remarks, you mentioned that your support and the cooperative support for the measure that's in the bill. Again, you kind of pointed out the solution is that you're going to have established and continued use of the small business tax rate for the people in your cooperative. Could you just explain, because you mentioned that there was some lobbying that was done to ensure that that happened. Could you explain just what the issue was and where the source of the problem that this now, in your opinion, fixes?
The particular budget amendment or the particular budget item that was proposed would deny the small business deduction to an incorporated farm who was a member owner, or their incorporated entity was a member owner of another incorporated company being their own cooperative. So their shareholding in their own cooperative would mean they were not deemed to be not dealing at arm's length, and that non-arm's length transaction would mean they would have to be denied access to small business. Okay, so they own a farm, but then they join a cooperative so they can participate with you. They would be able to receive that first up to $500,000, the lower rate. Is that correct? Yes.
Okay. And so you lobbied for that. That means did you go to the Ag Minister or did you go to the Minister of Finance?
We started with the Ag Minister and worked through Finance as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to switch gears a little bit, Mr. Cross. Just in regards to obviously the shares that we're purchasing. Those are deficit financed. There's apparently little to no chance, we heard from officials last night, of any kind of cost recovery because we're buying into something. So eventually Canadian taxpayers are going to have to pay that back plus the interest. Is that, that would be a safe thing to assume, would it not?
I'm not sure I follow the premise. Pay it back with interest? I mean, if you're paying it, are you talking about the contribution to the equity
to pay for it? Last time I checked, the government doesn't have a surplus to be able to buy the shares.
Oh, yes. Okay, I see where the interest comes from in this. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, no, just want to get that. And since we do have some old lawyers and some not so old lawyers, I'm going to assume, in the room, have either of you ever utilized work in progress, or sometimes what's referred to as bill-based accounting? You or any of your colleagues in law?
I can't balance my bank book, and certainly I couldn't answer that question properly. The firm that I'm with, and I'm just counsel there now, of hundreds of lawyers hires experts to do that sort of thing that are real accountants. I don't know.
And yourself?
Certainly, I do, and
okay.
I'm also on the executive of the Canadian Bar Association, so I wouldn't want to speak against
but no,
what
just
is
as an
their
individual,
position.
though, do you know that there is the first thing that this bill does is actually make changes to work in progress, so that one, let's see, eventually 20% at a time of a billing that's due at the end of the year, if you haven't received the money yet for the work that's been done, you're assumed though that you have to make a payment to the government.
Correct, and I have. Certainly as an individual, I'm concerned about those provisions.
So can you tell me why you're concerned?
Well, I'm not going to have the income in my hand to pay the tax.
So what will you do then? Will you just not take business on a contingency basis?
I don't take business on a contingency basis in any event, because that's not the nature of my practice, but absolutely, it's of concern.
Okay, so in my area, more rural or oriented, I've heard from lawyers that say that they just won't accept people that are a little bit more marginal cases because they're worried that they're going to have to be paying the bill for those cases through other accounts. And that might mean that some people won't be able to get access to a lawyer to be able to raise their concerns. Do you think that's a problem?
I can't speak to certainly individuals in rural communities. My clients are charities and not-for-profits, and often I don't get paid until they find other sources of funds in order to pay me, and that's just the nature of my practice. And so this kind of a change certainly will impact on that. I'm not going to change my practice because of my commitment to my clients.
Okay, and it's the nature of my practice to try and get all I can, so thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll have to cut it there, Ms. O'Connell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cooper, I wanted to talk about your actual testimony here in regards to the changes. When officials were here, I asked questions about the technical changes, and what was explained was really that, for example, if a gift of land was made to a municipality, they didn't have to go through this process, and this is a technical change to level the playing field. So I guess from your perspective, you mentioned that this is a welcome change, but from your perspective, did you see that, for example, gifts would be made to municipalities who maybe don't need it in the sense of land acquisition, rather than land trusts or charities that could really be stewards of the land because one was administratively more cumbersome?
With respect to that particular provision, I do feel it's appropriate to level the playing field. Okay. When an organization takes on the obligation to protect environmentally sensitive land, it comes with an obligation to steward that land. And it's not all municipalities that have the capacity or even the interest necessarily to properly steward the land. And also I have a concern downstream. There are pressures on municipalities to develop sometimes, and you know, I think that this is a program that has both belt and suspenders, and it's appropriate to strengthen that belt and those suspenders wherever possible to ensure that the land remains protected in perpetuity. So a level playing field with respect to municipalities, I think, is appropriate.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Thompson, on the geothermal, I don't know if this question is not appropriate for you because it sounds like you're obviously really involved in kind of the bigger projects, but when I was on municipal council, and hence my question previously, many years ago actually, we were trying to push for new developments to have geothermal energy. In my hometown, in my riding in Pickering, we have a lot of new development, and we're pushing for geothermal, but the development industry really didn't go there. And when we were looking at things like the different standards like gold and platinum and things like that, I mean, you would get 1 point for geothermal or 1 point for a bike rack. So you can imagine the development industry didn't really want to put the expense into this type of technology in residential homes. Does this change, and like I said, if this question is not for you, please let me know, but does this change now help encourage the geothermal use in more applications, because now it's being recognized in a system that, you know, especially in the building industry, is pushed, especially through planning acts and building codes and things like that. Do you see this moving in that direction?
I'm from Pickering as well, so thanks for the question, and my family still lives there. I was there this past weekend. You're describing GeoExchange, so there's a whole other association called the Canadian GeoExchange Coalition versus Cangia Geothermal Energy. So energy that we're talking about literally is an energy source radiating from the center of the earth, and GeoExchange is the ability for very shallow earth to store solar energy that then gets trapped in a few meters down. And so they actually just exchange very kind of low level degrees, like kind of 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, goes back and forth into buildings and houses. So GeoExchange is not geothermal energy that we're speaking about.
We were actually talking about geothermal technology.
No, geothermal...
into the ground, like it was, perhaps we can talk after and talk about it, but we were actually looking at opportunities for geothermal technology.
Many people call it geothermal. Okay. It's like people maybe misuse the word engineer. I'm an engineer. GeoExchange is the technology you're describing. We drill 1 to 3 kilometers underground. This is more like oil and gas, not.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, but so then it really doesn't have that application. So in terms of changing and pushing to have the technology adapted essentially or utilized more?
Well, to answer it a different way, so for example, Paris, the city of Paris, not Paris, Ontario, but Paris, France, they are the largest users of district heating. And so what they do is they replace a natural gas boiler or a kind of propane or bunker fuel boiler, and the earth boils the water first, and it comes up and it can be distributed to the houses. And so that replaces your forced air convection furnace. But that still originates 1 to 3 kilometers down. It comes up to a centralized facility, and then you do district heating. It's very different than just one home or one facility.
We did talk about district heating as well.
We will have to cut it there. On behalf of the committee, I certainly thank all your witnesses for all the witnesses for the interesting exchange by times, and thank you for being helpful on our study in Bill C-63. With that, we will adjourn until tomorrow.